Shadows stretch across the palace as a desperate scream pierces the twilight. "Your Majesty, you cannot do this." Within the gilded halls, a woman shrieks her claim. She is the true empress of this realm, the mother of the people and the sole consort. This broken woman is drowning in her own agony. She begs the man to tell her why he's throwing her away. The nobleman is Alexander Lorenzi, the emperor. With a gaze colder than ice, he tells Isabel to drop the act. She was never his only one. He mocks her. Had she forgotten Empress Sasha? Isabel calls her a mere consort, which triggers the emperor's fury. He barks that she's delusional. Isabel, with her fiery red hair and emerald eyes, stares at him, utterly shattered. Tears flood her eyes as she denies this nightmare. Meanwhile, the emperor pulls his mistress into a protective embrace. He scoffs that Isabel doesn't hold a candle to Sasha. He pities her for being so thirsty for power, obsessing over a title just to keep him. Sasha, with raven hair and violet eyes, watches the drama in silence. She clings to him, refusing to look Isabel in the eye. Together, they turn their backs on the empress. Isabel's world dissolves into tears. The arrogant emperor admits she was just a pawn to drain Duke Blake's power. He spits out the brutal truth. He never loved her. His heart belonged solely to Sasha. Crushed, the woman collapses. She can't process her husband's venomous words. Before they vanish from sight, she screams for him to wait. Alexander doesn't even flinch, leaving her desperate cries to echo in the empty hall. A phone buzzes loudly. Back in reality, a girl is fuming, her blood boiling over what she's reading. She's sick of the emperor's toxicity. Why can't Isabel just dump this loser and live her best solo life? The story is titled A Flower from Another World. It is a cliché fantasy romance where the protagonist wins the king. The main character becomes empress and chases the king's love. But our reader is just not vibing with it. Despite the loveless bond, the emperor already had a wife. Yet, the female lead had the nerve to steal the original empress's throne. The emperor was so whipped for Sasha that he tossed his wife aside. Empress Isabel rotted in a freezing room, dying of illness while he enjoyed himself with his new lover. Did he feel any guilt? Not a chance. He didn't even blink, marrying his mistress the moment his wife was gone. Our reader is shook by this trash man. What did Isabel do to deserve this? Was her only crime falling for a villain like him? She glances at the clock, wondering, how much longer can these characters endure? Realizing it's 3 a.m., she finally decides to call it a night. She has a big project tomorrow and needs to be early. But just before she drifts off, a thought hits. A voice echoes through the palace, calling for the empress. During tea, a servant approaches the redhead. She informs the lady that His Majesty has actually granted her an audience today. The room is filled with vibrant antique furniture. It looks like something straight out of a period drama. The space is massive, big enough to run. The maids look expensive, but Isabel barely recognizes herself. Her reflection is a total stranger. Originally, she was just a regular Korean college student. Then, she woke up in the kingdom of Castia. Sucked into the world of A Flower from Another World, she had become the tragic Isabel. At first, she thought it was a prank or a lucid dream, trying everything to snap out of it. But there was no waking up. Eventually, she accepted the truth. She was stuck being pampered by royal maids. Now trapped in Isabel's skin, she tries to keep her cool. She knows Isabel's past was a total mess, but she's not following that script. A maid chirps that she did amazing, praising her for working so hard. Thinking she put in all this effort just to see the emperor, Isabel is internally screaming. Is the emperor? They're talking about the male lead? Honestly, she wants to avoid that red flag forever. He's the one who turned Isabel's life into a dumpster fire. She tells the maids to hold on. She asks them to serve face and make her look drop-dead gorgeous. The maids are absolutely hyped for the glow-up. Isabel zones out as they gossip. She realizes these girls genuinely want her to be loved by the king. She feels a twinge of guilt for their hope, but she's sticking to her own survival plan. Refusing to live a lie, she straightens her posture and strides into the emperor's chambers with newfound grace. Her mind drifted elsewhere, detached and cold, until the towering doors of his private study finally appeared. After being ghosted for 2 weeks, he'd finally summoned her not to his bedchamber, but to this professional office. Maybe this was better. No games. Just straight to business so she could escape his presence for good. The emperor barely looked up, greeting her with zero energy. Honestly, he looked shocked she even showed up. Her eyes nearly popped out. Seeing him up close, he was a total 10 undoubtedly main lead material. With a voice dripping with ego, he demanded why they were meeting. She just fired back, asking if a married couple actually needed a reason to talk. Unimpressed, the arrogant man motioned for her to sit. Isabel knew the drill. She needed to harvest every scrap of intel to stay ahead. Survival was her middle name, having clawed through a lifetime of brutal, hostile environments. Before facing the lion in his den, she mentally mapped the battlefield to deconstruct the messy dynamic between Alexander, herself, and Sasha. It had only been 1 year and 6 months since Sasha first arrived at court. Coincidentally, that was the exact moment the Emperor's wandering eyes fixated on the newcomer. He asked if she'd finally come to her senses. Wearing a lethal smile, Isabel confirmed her change of heart. There was only one card left to play. Before he wrecked her life, a spark of curiosity lit his golden eyes as he leaned in. Isabel dropped the bomb. She wanted a divorce. Stunned, the Emperor stared like she'd grown a second head. He reminded her who he was, his voice cold. This wasn't the place for her little jokes. Disappointed but not surprised, Isabel felt exhausted. She had already predicted this typical reaction. During those years, Isabel had slaved away at palace life without one single complaint, all for his love. Now, she told him she was dead serious. She explained that, after much soul-searching, she realized the crown of the Empress simply wasn't her style. Alexander hung on every word as she declared this was her final, unchangeable choice. She asked for his understanding, but he scoffed. What did she mean? Too much. She'd been killing it as Empress for 3 years. Why the sudden flip-flop on her royal responsibilities? Isabel played the unworthy card, claiming she wasn't the right fit. Her eyes shimmered with hope. She prayed he'd see she wasn't playing. Instead, Alexander's gaze turned toxic, filled with pure contempt. Clearly annoyed by her words, he sneered, asking if she was just salty about his 2-week disappearance. That caught Isabel off guard. He justified his absence by mentioning a security breach, an actual invasion. He'd been busy handling the chaos, and actually had the audacity to ask for her forgiveness. His voice suddenly turned honey-sweet as he promised to move mountains just to be by her side. He vowed to see her daily, swearing he'd finally step up and be the perfect husband. Isabel listened, her internal BS meter spiking. She kept her cool, having already anticipated this performance. Clutching her skirts, she reminded herself not to bite the bait. She knew what tragic fate awaited her, and refused to be a victim twice. With a sharp smile, she noted he'd find a replacement fast. He'd find a more fitting partner soon. In fact, she'd be thrilled if his consort took her place. Alexander told her to ignore the consort entirely. He claimed the girl was only there for political optics. She was a mere diplomatic pawn who'd been at the palace for less than a year. He doubled down, insisting that replacing a woman like Isabel would be impossible. Because of that, he begged her to stop stressing over nothing. But Isabel wasn't blind to his gaze. He actually thought she was acting out from jealousy. How delusional. Despite his wild promises, the Empress clarified that Sasha wasn't the reason. Keeping her voice low and humble, she stated she simply didn't belong on that throne. She prayed he would finally understand. The cold-blooded Emperor narrowed his eyes, trying to dissect her thoughts and strip away her mask. Isabel freezes as he grills her on her plans for Duke Blake. She lets his words sink in. Once mighty nobles, Isabel's bloodline had watched their influence and gold wither away into nothingness over the years. Desperate to reclaim their glory, her father, Duke Blake, auctioned her off into a cold marriage with the Emperor. She remained oblivious to the contract's dark details, trying her best to find joy in her sheltered life. Who treats their own flesh and blood like a mere pawn? Our heroine finally admits she sees the game. Empire law is strict. A divorce requires a mutual yes from both the Empress and the Emperor. She politely feigns an apology for any misunderstandings, though she's sharp enough to know her facts are dead on. Visibly irked, the Emperor snaps that the law exists solely because divorce is practically unheard of in their history. He trails off, carefully calculating his next words regarding the sacred weight of the imperial bloodline. Tension rising, he demands to know if she's serious about leaving. If she is, his answer is a hard no. A scandal like a sudden divorce is out of the question. He declares that she can't just walk away. Throwing away the crown isn't an option. She isn't replaceable. He's clearly sweating the political fallout. Isabel sees the trap now. Realizing her move, he tries to shut down the conversation and buy some time. He offers her the world, any jewel or treasure, desperately trying to buy her loyalty with shiny bribes. You can live your own life, he says, but you'll do it while staying married to me. Isabel nervously grips her silk skirts, questioning his cryptic words. He coldly asks if he even has the right to lie. With a sharp, mocking edge, she asks if their titles as Emperor and Empress of Castile are just a joke. She asks if her only forbidden act is seeking freedom. He nods, confirming she's essentially his prisoner of rank. Isabel flashes a poised smile and bows perfectly, wishing eternal glory to the sun that supposedly never sets. Formalities done, she's far from satisfied. One glass of wine wasn't nearly enough to deal with this drama. She exits, leaving him brooding in his study. If he won't give her a divorce voluntarily, she'll force his hand by any means necessary. Suddenly, a suspicious shadow appears in the palace hallway. Isabel halts. The girl with the flowing black hair and pale eyes looks innocent, but Isabel knows it's a facade. It's Sasha, the Emperor's concubine. The two women lock eyes, the air between them thick with silent hostility. It seems the little mistress thinks she's special enough to visit the Emperor without even booking an appointment. Don't let the fragile look fool you. Sasha is a snake slithering through the palace, looking for an opening. Isabel tries to walk past the trash, but Sasha can't help herself, opening her mouth to start trouble. Sasha chirps about how long it's been. Isabel, however, is 0% interested in this fake bestie energy. The girl should have learned some manners to become a consort, but clearly, those lessons didn't stick at all. She treats the Empress like an equal. Fed up, Isabel demands to know why she's lurking around the study. Sasha just beams, casually mentioning she's there to have some quality time with the Emperor. She admits she checked his bedroom first before tracking him down to his private study. The absolute audacity. Isabel is floored. The girl really just waltzed into the Emperor's bedroom like she owns the place? Done with the nonsense, Isabel cuts her off, citing her busy schedule before turning her back on the girl. Wait, Sasha calls out. Isabel sighs, asking what now? Sasha claims she has something important to discuss. Apparently, she's been dying to have a heart-to-heart for a while now. Isabel braces for the incoming cringe. Sasha suggests they become total besties, sharing all their juicy secrets and deepest worries with each other. She's basically trying to force a sisterly bond, pretending she just wants total honesty between them. Then Sasha drops the mask. Is all this divorce talk just a thirsty play for the Emperor's attention? Silence falls. Back when Isabel first read the novel, she thought the consort was just a naive brat. She'd written Sasha off as a harmless fool, but seeing her now, the girl is clearly playing for keeps. Sasha is officially seeing the Empress as a rival. Too bad for her. Our girl is way ahead of the curve. Isabel just smirks. This low-level mean girl energy is literally child's play compared to her actual plans. Sasha is way too outclassed to see the trap Isabel is setting. What's so funny, the consort pouts. Isabel laughs, finding it hilarious to watch Sasha work so hard for a throne she doesn't even want anymore. Sasha stood there, visibly trembling. The Empress's cold words had shattered her composure, leaving her fighting back a flood of tears. The girl demands an explanation. Was all her effort for nothing? Isabel scoffs, telling Sasha she's welcome to him before sashaying away victoriously. Our main character clarifies things for the naive girl. She has zero interest in the Emperor. Isabel knows the game well. She couldn't care less if they play soulmates until the end of time. Just keep her out of their messy, dramatic little love story. To survive this twisted plot, she's fully embracing her role as the ultimate villainess. Since Alexander gave her a blank check, she decides to go on a legendary, no-limit shopping spree. She'd burn through the Empire's gold to fund a glamorous life. Isabel basked in the perfection of her new plan. Returning to her miserable past life? Not a chance. Since she's stuck here, she might as well enjoy the peak luxury lifestyle. Dawn breaks over the Imperial Palace. Servants scramble with heavy crates while maids frantically organize the chaos. Sasha demands answers from the staff. Visible irritation clouds her face as she snaps at Isabel, questioning this sudden disruption. Isabel coolly explains she's relocating. After all, the main Empress's palace is currently undergoing a massive overhaul. Sasha's confusion turns to outrage. Why would Isabel choose to crash her personal space of all the places available? A wicked, satisfied smirk plays on Isabel's lips. This was her first true power move. She was claiming the consort's palace, Sasha's current residence. This was the opening act of her villain era. Isabel's old quarters were grand and packed with luxury, yet they felt like a prison compared to the rival's home. Her palace was a joke compared to the lavish estate the Emperor had showered upon Sasha. Once the Emperor turned his back, the staff followed suit. Isabel's home became a neglected, crumbling ruin. Winter winds would howl through the cracks in the walls, but for too many reasons, she couldn't fix it. The cold eventually triggered tuberculosis. Despite Sasha's innocent act, her palace was a hoard of stolen imperial riches. The consort's rooms were overflowing with priceless gifts from the Emperor. Isabel wasn't sure when the divorce would happen. While waiting for her freedom, she intended to give the Empress's palace a total, high-end makeover. She'd remodel every inch to fit her vibe, even if the construction took forever. That's exactly why she needed a temporary home that didn't double as a dusty construction zone. Every other palace was miles away, and this consort building had plenty of unused, empty rooms. What's the harm in sharing? Isabel drops a sarcastic bomb, asking if Sasha wants to swap palaces. She jokes that the drafty ruins are airy and minimalist. Surely, the little consort would love the aesthetic. Sasha stood there, completely stunned into silence. Her brain was literally short-circuiting. Leaning into her villainous persona, Isabel casually suggests Sasha can just move to a different wing instead. The girl snaps back, claiming the palace is hers. Why should she surrender her territory to the Empress? Watching the young woman lose her cool was pure satisfaction for Isabel. The villainess was winning. Since Sasha refused to budge, Isabel decided they'd just have to become the Empire's newest roommates. The redhead offers a sharp smile, hoping they'll become the best of friends. After all, it's just business. What could possibly go south with this setup? One look at Sasha's face showed she was absolutely seething. Fuming at Isabel's sheer audacity, Sasha clenches her fists. She forces out a fake, worried comment about Isabel. She brings up how much the Empress supposedly loathes her. Then, she puts on that annoying, innocent mask. She asks if the Emperor would even approve of this mess. Isabel doesn't give a single damn. Isabel laughs, seeing through the act. Sasha was dying to run and snitch to the Emperor like a child. Isabel questions if the concern is even real. Our protagonist finds this sudden worry from her rival incredibly laughable. The sheer irony of the situation stings the consort. Isabel can see the girl's composure starting to crack. One look at Sasha's face confirmed it. She was heading straight to the Emperor to play the victim. Later that afternoon, Isabel was chilling with some tea. Suddenly, the tranquility was shattered as the doors flew open. Alexander stormed in, looking absolutely livid. Isabel sighed, knowing exactly why the king was throwing a tantrum. He storms up, claiming Sasha told him some truly unbelievable news about her recent behavior. He demands to know if she's really trying to move into the consort's private palace. The Emperor growls that she already has her own royal quarters. Isabel bluntly points out that seizing Sasha's domain was a totally unforced error. Reminding him of his promise for total freedom, she watches his temper ignite into fury. Our heroine coolly claims she was just following orders by doing as she pleased. To make matters worse, she offered the Empress's own quarters to Sasha. The girl declined the gift, leaving Alexander to scoff at the utter absurdity. He boasts about constructing an even grander, more elite palace just for her. Why the obsession with snatching up property that clearly belongs to another? With a faint sigh, Isabel clarifies that no other estate will satisfy her. The consort palace is her only target, earning her a wary glare. She claps back, reminding His Majesty that he granted her total carte blanche. The pair lock eyes in a tense standoff, Alexander's gaze burning with reckless intensity. Meanwhile, Isabel wears a smug smirk, clearly reveling in her tactical victory. Admitting defeat, Alexander exhales sharply and grants her permission to proceed. He groans about her being stubborn as a mule, while our lead beams with triumph. However, she knew this small win wouldn't force a divorce just yet. He'd tolerate any amount of nonsense just to maintain the royal facade. Sensing an advantage, she offers a polite curtsy and voices her gratitude. She praises his wise choice, but Alexander warns that the road ahead is treacherous. Sharing a roof is risky, so he demands she avoid stirring up drama. A scandal would tarnish the throne's image. A lecture Isabel hears in silence. He vows to handle Sasha somehow, prompting a lethal grin from Isabel. Refusing to make promises, she declares that the outcome rests entirely on one thing. Sasha's attitude determines the peace, and Isabel knows the consort won't play nice. With tensions peaking, a new dawn breaks over the lush palace gardens. Amidst chirping birds, Isabel strolls with her entourage, lost in a sea of contemplation. The heavy silence blanketed the palace, feeling far more suffocating than she expected. It feels way too suspicious, despite this being only a temporary arrangement. Refusing to play house, Isabel commands the staff to move her belongings immediately. Every trunk goes to its room. Isabel is making this place hers. She floods every corner with her things, effectively staging a total takeover. Spreading out rapidly, she now controls over 70% of the palace. The consort palace is hers, yet Sasha is nowhere to be found. Isabel assumes the Emperor must be coddling Sasha to keep her quiet. The estate is massive, yet she still keeps crossing paths with her rival. Instead of throwing hands, Sasha just gives her the cold shoulder every time. Sasha looks devastated, likely muzzled by the Emperor's direct command for silence. Isabel has zero interest in becoming a third wheel in their romance. Her goal is simple: provoke Sasha into throwing the first punch. Yet, the consort refuses to hand her the divorce papers on a silver platter. Is Alexander subtly hinting that he'll never let her go, no matter the cost? It's draining. In the original plot, Isabel was nothing but a side character. Born to be Sasha's shadow, she knows she'll soon be discarded like trash. But our girl isn't about to sit back and swallow all that misery. Escape is her only priority, and she needs out right now. Isabel needs to level up her villainy, so she summons her loyal maids. It was time for a total wardrobe overhaul. She demanded every top-tier tailor in the capital report to her. To play the perfect villainess, excess wasn't just a choice, it was a requirement. Every grand designer was summoned. The palace buzzed with activity, as designers hauled rolls of exotic silk and luxury fabrics through the halls. Draped in her robe, Isabel watched the frantic hustle with a cold, piercing gaze. Every legendary designer in the empire was present, gathered for a single, royal purpose. Rumors swirled like wildfire. One whispered that the Empress had scorched her entire old wardrobe to ashes. Some heard she'd buried her gems, while others claimed she'd tossed her lesser jewels to the common maids. These masters were now tasked with a singular mission: crafting an entirely new, legendary wardrobe from scratch. Every accessory would be a custom masterpiece. Nervous, a designer presented his latest sketch, hoping for approval. He offered an exclusive lookbook, swearing the crimson fabrics would perfectly complement her fiery scarlet hair. As he gestured toward the catalog, a smirk of genuine satisfaction flickered across Isabel's face. These elite designers were on another level. Each gown exuded a level of opulence she'd never imagined. The realization hit her she'd never even dreamed of touching such luxury in her previous, miserable life. Back then, her parents bled her dry, forcing her to fund her brother's education while she suffered. The emotional toll was crushing. They constantly weaponized her university degree against her to justify their greed. Since her brother lacked her opportunities, they demanded her soul. She'd finally reached her breaking point. In a defiant explosion of emotion, she declared that she was done. From now on, she lived for herself. Her parents were stunned. She was desperate to flee that suffocating cycle of torment forever. Despite years of sacrificing her wages for them, those bitter memories still haunted her heart. A wave of melancholy hit Isabel. She felt a deep, painful resonance with the original character's tragic fate. As she turned the pages, the contrast became clear. She and the original Isabel were worlds apart. In her past life as Jane, she'd struggled to afford even the cheapest rags from a bargain bin. Now, draped in jewels, she felt like bowing to the sheer luxury, even while occupying the Empress's body. She wanted to cry with joy over the gowns, but she had to maintain her cold, regal mask. Any sign of humble wonder would blow her cover. One slip up, and the palace would grow suspicious. "Your Majesty, what do you think?" the tailor asked, prideful of his one-of-a-kind masterpieces. Her response caught him totally off guard. She coolly acknowledged her own impeccable, high-class standards. Though the role felt alien, Isabel had to commit to the performance to ensure her survival. She carelessly hurled the catalog aside, a wicked, arrogant smirk spreading across her lips. "Is there anyone else capable of such hideous designs?" she sneered, leaving the man utterly stunned. If she stepped out in such trash, she'd be the laughingstock of the entire capital. Crossing her legs elegantly, she hissed, "I hope you didn't come here just to show me these rags." The Empress then demanded to see something actually worth her time and far more expensive. Stunned by her sharp tongue, the tailor froze. "Well? Is there anything else worth seeing?" she pressed. Trembling and exhausted, the man admitted he had nothing else prepared for her yet. He begged for 2 months, but she snapped back. "Do you expect me to wear a robe until then?" 2 months? Infuriated, she warned the tailor that lying would be a fatal mistake for his health. She knew Sasha was scheduled for a secret fitting next week. High-end fashion was always custom-tailored. These exclusive designs were never meant for others. After all, the nobility despised anything less than unique. Seeing their look on arrival was social suicide. Every single stitch had to be one of a kind. Within high society, the young consort Sasha was notorious for her influence and expensive taste. Relying on his status, the man desperately argued that his current sketches better suited a certain aesthetic. He admitted they were reserved for Sasha. From his rambling excuses, Isabel saw right through him. Those designs weren't officially reserved yet. The realization hit her this man was lying to her face. How long had the original Isabel let people walk over her? "You're quite the arrogant one, aren't you? Hand over those designs. Now," she barked. The tailor froze, paralyzed by her icy command. Isabel sneered, reminding him that an empress wields power a mere consort could only envy. To emphasize her dominance, armored guards closed in, shadowing the trembling and petrified tailor. Fearing for his life, the man stammered that his assistants could deliver everything immediately. Moments later, Isabel browsed the catalog with the sharp, discerning eye of a true queen. When asked for her favorite, she dropped a bombshell. "I'm taking every single one." "I loathe repeating myself," she snapped, shoving the catalog back into his shaking, sweaty hands. She reiterated her demand. She wanted it all. Money was no object for her plan. These gowns weren't just fashion. They were her secret getaway fund for the upcoming divorce. Meanwhile, inside the emperor's majestic palace, the air was thick with indignant, furious shouting. A counselor demanded to know if Alexander realized the staggering fortune Isabel was burning through. The room erupted. Officials argued frantically, their faces red with fury over the empress's spending. Critics hissed that maintaining royal prestige didn't justify such a massive, reckless drain on resources. Her shopping spree had effectively swallowed an entire day's worth of the imperial defense budget. Alexander remained a statue of silence, watching the chaotic debate with chilling, unreadable, dark eyes. A loyal subject stepped forward, masking his hidden agenda with a plea for brutal honesty. He admitted Isabel was talented, but claimed her extravagance was an insult to the crown. The emperor's fingers drummed a slow, menacing rhythm against the polished and expensive mahogany table. They argued her flashy habits were a total mismatch for the weight of her royal title. One man maliciously suggested that Sasha, the consort, was the perfect candidate for a replacement. The drum of Alexander's fingers stopped. A heavy, suffocating pressure suddenly filled the entire room. "Are you done?" he asked, his voice cutting through their complaints like a sharpened blade. He'd been patient, but these men were acting like wild horses who'd forgotten their master. Alexander began reciting a legendary poem, his words echoing with the weight of ancient authority. He reminded them that Castile's glory outshone even the mythical, golden splendor of ancient Icarus. That kind of magnificence couldn't be bought with all the gold hidden in Lake Nixos. Though civilizations might crumble, he declared his empire's prestige would stand eternal and totally unshakable. The counselors flinched. The raw power in his voice left them utterly speechless and tormented. Alexander reminded the room that the empire's wealth was as infinite as the deepest seas. Did they honestly believe a few silk dresses would even scratch the imperial treasury's depth? "I am Alexander Lorenzi II, he declared. "I am the living soul of this empire." His prestige was absolute. Who among them was foolish enough to challenge his divine authority? Shame washed over them as he asked if Isabel's legendary competence hadn't earned her luxury. He'd gathered the empire's finest minds, yet none could see the true importance of prestige. Alexander stood by his empress. Then, his predatory gaze locked onto the trembling finance minister. The official withered under the pressure as Alexander questioned his sudden, bold, and public insubordination. I would never doubt your majesty," the man stammered, his face turning deathly pale. He scrambled for excuses, claiming his treasonous words were just misunderstood concerns for the state. "You've forgotten your place," Alexander snapped, his patience finally reaching its absolute breaking point. Since he had overstayed his welcome in power, the emperor decided it was time for consequences. Orders were barked, and the finance minister was stripped of his title on the spot. Dragged away screaming, he was sentenced to 3 months of strict, humiliating mansion house arrest. He would never allow his empress to wear rags that insulted the empire's vast wealth. Alexander realized the truth. Isabel's dazzling prestige was a direct reflection of his own power. The defense minister quickly pivoted, sycophantically agreeing that only the best luxury suited the empress. Alexander smirked, certain the man would fall right into line. He then challenged the room, asking if anyone dared oppose his empress being draped in total luxury. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he commanded a gown, 10 times more opulent and legendary than any previous design. The secretary bowed low, vowing to execute the emperor's every royal whim. With a piercing, icy stare, Alexander snapped the council back to reality, demanding they resume. Later, whispers erupted in the halls over the firing of Minister Claxton. Alexander merely shrugged, noting the trash was cleared faster than anticipated. Privately, he spoke with his aide, confessing that while the minister once propped up the crown, he'd been granted power far beyond his worth. But like a parasite, his greed drove him to snatch more perks. The emperor had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And finally, a flaw appeared. The secretary warned that if the emperor treated him like a common noble, the backlash would be immense. Alexander scoffed, remarking on how fools forget their place and how human hunger truly has no limits. A heavy silence lingered. Alexander narrowed his eyes, asking the secretary what he was really trying to say. And the man sighed, admitting the public might never see him as a wise, sane ruler if his ruthless choices overshadowed his victories. In the face of this, the emperor smirked, telling his aide he was still missing the bigger picture. In his eyes, his reign was only just beginning. He was still in the brutal phase of expanding the empire's shadow. So, Alexander chose to rule through sheer terror. He dropped a chilling truth to his aide, declaring his intent to purge every weakness, rule with an iron fist, and crush obstacles without mercy. This cold-blooded strategy was the only lesson he had ever truly learned from his father. Turning on his heel, he threw back a terrifying question. Would he have ever eliminated his own father, just to look wise? The secretary froze, haunted by the memory that it had already been 3 years since Alexander soaked the throne in blood by ending the previous emperor's life. Though that violent coup had finally silenced the northern barbarians and forged a superpower, many critics still hid behind the pathetic excuse that, because they were young, they should fight with words. But Alexander wasn't a man who hid or retreated. He was a force ready to steamroll any rival for his own satisfaction. The secretary realized that the empress's gown was more than a gift, it was a warning. He sighed, knowing his workload would explode. He also wondered what the empress would think, hoping she wouldn't see the hidden thorns in this bouquet. A new dawn breaks over the palace. Servants scramble as a flood of gifts arrives, including a massive gown. Isabel stared, floored by the mountain of boxes. Our heroine was totally captivated. Isabel was stunned by the rare gems twinkling on the fabric. She traced the delicate golden threads, a level of craftsmanship she hadn't seen in her entire life. It was truly mind-blowing how the gown felt light as a feather despite its many layers. The butler announced this was a tribute from Alexander. She expected something nice, but this was a masterpiece that defied imagination. A servant leaned in to explain that this was a personal commission from the emperor's heart, costing as much as an entire palace. Isabel's heart nearly stopped at the price tag. When a drop of sweat almost fell, she nearly lost her mind. Shaking, she asked when Alexander had even thought of her. In response, the butler presented a letter handwritten by the tyrant himself. Isabel's breath caught as she read his words, where he admitted he wasn't quite sure if the silk could ever match the beauty of her eyes. He added that the next time they met, he expected her to wear it. She was spinning, her mind a total mess, trying to decode his true game. She remembered how Alexander used to treat her like she didn't exist. Was he changing? A maid chirped that the gown was a literal work of art. No one in the history of the empire had ever seen such a breathtaking design. The girl beamed at her. The empress had snagged something breathtaking, but her methods? Totally scandalous. She kept gushing about how Isabel's sincere heart finally reached the emperor. Isabel was honestly floored. Hearing that nonsense made a maid immediately snap at the girl for her out-of-line comments. The girl scrambled to apologize for the slip-up, but Isabel just waved it off like it was nothing. It hit her. Then these girls were celebrating this success as if they'd won the lottery themselves. Truth is, Isabel didn't have a hateful bone in her body for that girl. She remembered her as a ride-or-die loyalist throughout her entire chaotic palace life. Honestly, Isabel actually vibed with her, but as for the rest of the staff, that was a total mystery. She figured she'd just piece that puzzle together later. Time to pivot to the real tea, the insane price tag on that dress. The emperor claimed this blue gown literally cost as much as a whole damn palace. Back in her past life, she was a total shopaholic, but royal standards? That's a whole different level. If she wanted to outlux this man, she was going to have to try way harder. Seems he wasn't even flexing, he just had an endless pit of money to burn. Or maybe this was his way of guilt-tripping her after she dropped the divorce bomb. Was he really that desperate to keep her? Right then, a maid stepped up. She insisted Isabel try on the masterpiece, practically begging to help her get ready. But Isabel wasn't biting. She turned cold, declaring she wouldn't even touch the dress yet. She wasn't about to accept such a massive parting gift from a man that she's planning to dump. Just toss it in the closet, she commanded. Savage. The orchestra swells as high society guests gossip over expensive appetizers. Dinner was served, and then the main event. Isabel glided in, looking absolutely ethereal. With her fiery hair pinned up and those emerald eyes glowing, she was a total magnet. This Friday night gala was a mandatory royal ritual for everyone, even the staff. This tradition went back generations, but the sheer cost? It was bordering on insane. A weekly flex of pure wealth. Regardless, Isabel had every detail planned to perfection. It was sophisticated, high class, and kept the royal reputation sparkling. She felt a smug wave of satisfaction. Not everyone has the vision to pull this off. While swirling her wine like a boss, a voice cut through the music with a compliment. It was Count Barkley, sporting a creepy stare and a smile that screamed bad news. Just a side character, really, but he'd been hanging around since day one. This guy was Sasha's biggest fanboy, desperately wanting her on the throne instead. All Isabel could think was, that mustache is tragic. The Count was floored by her coldness. When he asked what was up, Isabel just smiled. It was finally time to drop the fake act. Do you like my honesty, Count? She teased. He was totally lost. He stuttered, claiming he was just trying to be nice and praise her for the party. Isabel didn't blink. She hit him with a challenge. Did it seriously take you 3 years to find your manners? The Count was stunned. She walked away, knowing that if he were legit, he would have said something ages ago. He was just trying to clout chase now that she was the main character. The pushover Isabel who used to fall for those lies? She was long gone. The old Isabel was history. Right now, she had bigger fish to fry. Striding through the Golden Hall, she started plotting. That's when she saw Alexander. The emperor was dripped out in his full imperial gear. Isabel definitely took notice. Seriously, the man was a visual god, the kind of beauty that only appears once a century. She'd skimmed the original plot before. It felt like a cringy trope, yet here it was, the cold reality. Isabel's heart jolted at his sudden presence. Across the hall, the Empress's gaze remained locked on the man. His eyes met hers in a heavy silence. Alexander's stare was chillingly mute, leaving her completely breathless. Out of nowhere, a figure cut through their tension. A cascade of long, raven hair swayed in the air. Draped in an exquisite cream gown, Sasha boldly addressed the Emperor by his first name. Gasps caught in the throats of the guests. How could a mere consort disregard such royal protocol? The secretary instantly snapped at her for the disrespect. Sasha merely chirped about her overwhelming happiness. She claimed her joy simply overflowed. However, Alexander's expression remained as cold as ice. Clinging to his arm, Sasha whispered how much she'd pined for him. Watching this play out, Isabel cringed, thinking the whole public display of affection was way too extra. Yet the crowd ate it up, treating her like some tragic heroine. Despite the blatant disrespect, Sasha kept up her wide-eyed innocent act. As the couple departed, Isabel caught a strange vibe. The girl sighed that even daily meetings would not satisfy her longing for him. Sasha confessed she'd been counting down the days for this specific gala, just to be near him. Alexander dryly reminded her these events happened every single week. Why the hype? Isabel's eyebrows shot up as Sasha dropped a loaded response. She claimed every week felt special because the entire imperial family finally gathered together. Family? The word stung. Before Isabel could process it, the emperor demanded her full attention. Sasha apologized for her slip of the tongue. Isabel sensed a calculated provocation behind those sweet words. How did the original Isabel ever let these petty jabs hurt her? Sasha just continued her naive act. Our lead realized it did not matter if their romance was legit or a total sham. Since she was not the original victim, these mind games could not touch her soul. Falling for such amateur traps wasn't her style. Besides, she had a much deadlier agenda in mind. Isabel elegantly swirled her vintage red while staring down Marquis Wilhelm with icy indifference. Seeing his fear, she doused the startled Marquis with her wine in a sudden, calculated strike. Gasps echoed through the hall as Isabel flashed a chillingly satisfied grin. Smirking, she dropped a hollow apology, claiming her glass simply slipped through her fingers. Drenched in red, the Marquis stood humiliated while a terrified Sasha trembled in shock. Seeking refuge behind the emperor, Sasha watched as Isabel doubled down on her slippery hand excuse. He hissed that this was no accident, but Isabel nonchalantly reminded him she'd already apologized. "What more do you want?" she challenged, sticking firmly to her accidental script. As he doubted her, she warned it might happen again, then delivered a thunderous, stinging slap. Stunned by her raw power, he realized Isabel's pure, burning hatred for him was real. How could he, a married man with a family, lay a hand on one of her girls? The nerve! Rewinding a bit, our MC recalls snagging some juicy intel from the servants' whispers. Intrigued, she edged closer to the commotion. One maid was gently soothing her distraught friend. Sobbing, the girl confessed a man was bombarding her with creepy, obsessive letters. He actually tracked her to her sanctuary. Terror paralyzed her instantly. She shuddered, fearing Marquis Wilhelm was lurking outside her workplace. That name sparked instant recognition in Isabel as the girls whispered dark secrets. Sinister rumors suggested he preyed on young girls, followed by another chilling comment. He discarded his own daughter into a destitute family like she was trash. Horrific rumors swirled about his predatory obsession with targeting young girls. Gossipers whispered that the Marquis threw his daughter to a low-tier family, basically treating his own blood like unwanted garbage. One girl whispered in terror, paralyzed by the crushing aura of an absolute monster. Isabel overhears the maid confessing her paralyzing terror of that disgusting creep. If the girl had to quit or flee her home, Isabel's blood would boil with rage. Thinking about that fossil preying on a girl young enough to be his granddaughter made her see red. Such depravity would trigger her regardless, but this was on a whole different level of disgusting. Since this innocent girl was her ride or die, Isabel inhaled deeply, steeling her resolve. Hoping to ease the young woman's anxiety, our queen decided it was time for some justice. Snapping back to reality, Isabel's hand blurs as she delivers another thunderous slap to the Marquis. The onlookers panicked, wondering if anyone would intervene, while Sasha stood there, completely lost. In that opulent hall, the nobles began scolding the Empress, but Isabel couldn't care less. She kept raining blows upon the Marquis, relishing this direct and satisfying form of retribution. Despite the loud protests, not a single soul dared to step in. Well, almost no one. Sasha watched Alexander march forward, his voice booming as he called out the Empress's name. She smirked, having baited exactly the reaction she wanted, then declared she wasn't done yet. Claiming there was one final task, the radiant Empress wound up for a devastating kick. Right between the Marquis's legs! The crowd gasped at how insanely fast things had spiraled. The Marquis finally paid the price in agony, his body crumpling helplessly to the floor. Knocked out cold by her strike, she glared down at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. Isabel realized she had to play the cards she was dealt to protect her people. She spun around as Alexander shouted, feeling a flicker of dread as he closed the distance. Alexander's expression was ice-cold as he loomed over her, waiting for a single word. Maintaining her defiant stance, she dared to ask what his problem was, despite his obvious fury. Livid over the absolute chaos she'd ignited at the feast, Alexander suddenly reached out and seized her arm. Isabel started talking, fully committed to making the biggest public scene possible. She hoped to force his hand into a divorce and end this humiliation once and for all. Helping Sasha in the process felt weird, but she had to follow her gut. She chose her own path, knowing Alexander might make her vanish shortly after this. His glare was intense as he criticized the mess she made, leaving Isabel utterly bewildered. Was he losing it? Despite his trash attitude, the man was still undeniably attractive. Struggling to read his play, she watched as the emperor let out a heavy sigh. He deemed her behavior unacceptable, while glancing down at her bruised and swollen hand. After those brutal slaps, he turned and barked an order for the royal physician. He wanted her treated immediately. Was she the only one seeing this bizarre 180? Apparently not. Approaching him with a heavy dose of irony, Isabel pointed out the obvious. Marquis Wilhelm was the one unconscious on the tiles and likely in desperate need of a doctor. The emperor told her to do as she pleased, and soon they were far from the crowd. As the physician checked her hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that Alexander was shielding her. After a thorough examination, the doctor confirmed that there was no permanent damage. Aside from the redness, she was fine, noting Alexander hadn't actually scolded her in public. He demanded the doctor provide top-tier care, leaving Isabel questioning his true motives. One second, he seemed annoyed, and the next, he flashed her a surprisingly tender smile. She looked away to avoid catching feelings, wondering what that look was even supposed to mean. Elsewhere, the elite were whispering about the mysterious golden threads appearing in the palace. Others gossiped about the shift in power. Since the emperor used to only have eyes for the consort, what could have possibly triggered such a savage transformation from the empress? Knowing she looked like a villain, Alexander offered to escort her to dinner, punctuating the offer with a charming wink. Isabel is completely blindsided by the emperor's sudden 180 as they sweep into the golden hall. Without a word, he slides off his heavy imperial coat, draping it over her shoulders in a protective, possessive move. Secretly, Isabel's heart flutters at the warmth. Scanning the room, her gaze lands on the figures lurking in the background behind the crowd. Sasha looks absolutely wrecked. The mistress is visibly spiraling, and our protagonist realizes just how deeply this display of affection is crushing her. Whispers ripple through the crowd like wildfire as everyone dissects the royal drama. Headlines will be screaming tomorrow. She can already see the tabloids dissecting her royal romance. Is his sudden change of heart just a move to bury the divorce rumors and play damage control with the public? The situation is dangerously compromising. Alexander addresses the guests, explaining that tonight is just a casual hang, not some stiff formal affair. Forget business. This was meant to be a chill mixer for the palace staff. He wishes that no one feels the weight of royal pressure tonight. Isabel thinks he's totally capping. If this low-key party is this extra, imagine how insane the annual gala must be. Even the finger foods look like Michelin star art. She sighs, knowing she needs fuel. To power through her villainous arc, Alexander leans in, urging the empress to eat. Since she'd drained her stamina earlier, she lets out a totally awkward, panicked laugh. Sasha tries to play nice, gushing over Isabel's stunning Charlotte Collins gown to start a convo. She mentions hearing the empress hauled 14 custom designs from the shop, claiming the fit is serving, while she, the humble saint, is fine with basic, simple models. Our protagonist watches the mistress play the pick-me card, realizing exactly what game is being played. In the original story, Sasha was the humble girl, the one who shamed a noblewoman's mink stole by acting like a modest martyr. Sasha claims she'd never touch luxury fur, preferring cheap rabbit pelt over such extravagance. That move left the noble lady humiliated, and the men completely obsessed with Sasha's purity. Old Isabel might have missed the manipulation, but now it's obvious. Didn't she literally brag about being besties with the boutique owner 5 minutes ago? Ignoring Sasha's bait, Alexander turns his full, heavy attention toward Isabel, demanding to know why she isn't wearing the specific dress he gifted her. He asks if his gift was beneath her. Suddenly, the dinner vibe turns icy as Isabel wonders what his deal is. Why the sudden intensity? She refuses to catch feelings. The guests go quiet, sensing a royal fallout brewing again. Knowing she's being watched, Isabel decides to double down on her villainess persona. She scoffs, telling him that mere clothes don't match his high nobility. She demands a whole city, or a castle instead. The crowd gasps in pure shock. He's the emperor, she thinks. Go big or go home. But things aren't going to plan. Alexander actually smirks. He grabs her hand, eyes locking onto hers with heat. Just one city? He asks. Even if he conquered the world for her, she would still be irreplaceable. He makes it clear to everyone. She is the empire's soul, his only empress. Isabel is shook. Did he eat something spoiled? Her master plan was only get paid and get divorced, not to inherit the entire royal treasury. This level of simping makes zero sense. What if he actually buys her a city-valued dress? Suddenly, Sasha cuts in, desperately telling the emperor she'd be happy even with zero expensive gifts. Boasting she only craves silk and linen, the consort preaches that a person's core values never shift. Judging by her humble attire, he notes her only condition was the emperor's unwavering presence. That devotion alone would suffice forever. The elite crowd hung on every word of her vow. Despite her lack of riches, he cherished her like a gem, leaving Isabel absolutely stunned. Truthfully, our lead found this sudden display illogical. She had always viewed Sasha as a clever girl, Sharp as she was, Sasha's insecurity flared the moment Alexander shifted focus toward Isabel. Alexander cold shoulders Sasha, demanding what she means. He reminds her she arrived with absolutely nothing. What was the point? He insists her allowance perfectly matches the status of an imperial consort. No more, no less. That icy dismissal left Sasha visibly trembling as he pressed her further. How could she serve the empire without grasping the weight of the resources she controlled? To him, humility wasn't a royal's only requirement. Isabel stayed quiet, watching the tense sparring unfold. Devastated by his words, Sasha withered. When asked, she whispered that she would never forget. Isabel sighed, certain that despite this harsh scolding, Sasha would inevitably repeat her annoying antics. Would the original Alexander ever lash out like this? In the novel, he never treated her coldly. Her memories held no such cruelty. Looking around, the suffocating dinner proved everyone was equally shocked. With the nobles squirming in their seats, Isabel felt lost in this rapidly shifting new reality. She recalled vividly how the emperor and consort were supposed to ruthlessly discard her in the end. Finally, she focused on her meal. To Alexander, Sasha's humble performance seemed like a pathetic exaggeration. She replayed his words, struck by his intense stance on the heavy obligations of the nobility. Isabel pegged him as a typical tyrant, but then Alexander suddenly invited guests for a drink. He offered a toast, and as several nobles eagerly accepted, the tension began to slightly thaw. Isabel realized he could shift the mood effortlessly. With a predatory glint, she prepared her move. Determined to win, she planned to act so insufferable that everyone would beg her to leave. Isabel launched her diva act, demanding servants debone her fish and insisting her steaks be grilled. She demanded peeled tomatoes, claiming the skins were indigestible. The guests began to whisper in disbelief. They gossiped about her difficult attitude, shocked that the gentle empress had turned so incredibly volatile. The merciful Isabel was gone. Meanwhile, the men whispered about the consort's submissive and sweet nature. Sasha played the perfectly obedient doll, which only served to irritate Isabel as she listened. Ignoring the brainless gossip about her and Sasha, she focused on the meal, which tasted divine. The empress reminded herself to stay fully committed to her role as the unrepentant villainess. Alexander sipped his drink in silence until something unexpected caught his eye. Days passed quietly. Peace reigned until a mysterious invitation arrived. It was an elegant letter from Duchess Salinger. The name was totally unfamiliar, never appearing in the novel. Why would this woman contact her? Isabel's personal records held no mention of the Duchess, ruling out any hidden blood relations. Could she be a secret ally? Since Isabel was merely a minor character in the plot, it made sense that her friends weren't mentioned. But if the Duchess was truly her confidant, rejecting the invite would look suspicious. However, with Isabel's personality overhauled, she had to be careful. Ignoring a close friend would only make the court label her a total madwoman. In this empire, madwomen were burned. Her only goal was a divorce, not a funeral. Avoiding the flames was priority one. Our protagonist decided to tread much more carefully from now. Driven by curiosity over the invitation, she concluded that a change of scenery was finally necessary. Walking was better than rotting in her room. Since she was stuck, she needed fresh intel. She required deeper intel. She knew there were hidden truths to uncover. Information far beyond what servants could reveal, or anything found in library books. Isabel realized a tea party might be her best bet. This circle of noble women was the perfect hunting ground for the secrets she needed to uncover. But how could she even navigate this den of vipers? Inside Salinger Palace, high society elites swarmed the halls in their finest silks. Debutantes flaunted their couture, while the it girls whispered the latest scandals rippling through the capital. Duchess Salinger finally welcomed the afternoon's true guest of honor, Empress Isabel of Castile herself. This marked the first time our main character stepped into the real world, facing someone besides her personal tailors. One look at the Duchess told Isabel everything. Her rank and seniority made her the ultimate queen bee of this room. Isabel had to play it cool. Was Salinger a potential ally, or just another snake in the grass? Whispers followed her. Some girls gushed over how that wine-red fabric made her crimson hair and porcelain skin absolutely pop. While scanning the room for the next arrival, a sharp, mocking laugh caught Isabel off guard. "Your gown is quite extravagant," the Duchess remarked, her enigmatic smile hiding a sinister edge. The mask was off. It was crystal clear now the Duchess wasn't here to play nice. In this world of old money, mentioning price tags was the ultimate social sin. Even at the most lavish galas, discussing finances remained strictly taboo. Asking how much did that cost was a one-way ticket to immediate social exile. When the Duchess called the dress luxurious, she wasn't praising it, she was throwing major shade. With a sneer, Salinger doubled down, implying the gown was royal, but the woman wearing it? Not so much. Isabel wasn't having it. How could a woman this old be so clueless about basic manners? Even if her family's name was dragged through the mud, power wasn't an excuse for trashy behavior. Did they really think they could disrespect her just because her house had fallen from grace? To the Duchess, Isabel was probably just a peasant playing dress-up, someone who'd never belong. But the old, weak Isabel was gone. Snapping her fan open, she prepared to show this woman what happens when you poke a lioness. It's Boutique Winston. Isabel dropped the name, watching the Duchess's face instantly glitch. Flaunting her silhouette, she casually mentioned that the shop had endless fabulous designs for someone with her taste. She then called out the Duchess's own hypocrisy, noting they clearly shopped at the exact same extravagant place. The older woman bolted from the table, unable to handle the heat, leaving Isabel with a victory smirk. That's how you serve a taste of someone's own medicine. Our main character had clocked the truth instantly. Salinger was wearing the same label. One more word, and the Duchess's high-class facade would have crumbled. Pro tip: don't start a fight you can't finish. Isabel then noticed 2 vacant chairs left at the table. One was for her, but who was the mystery guest? Then, the main event finally walked in. The room erupted as Sasha, the imperial consort, floated in wearing a dainty, embroidered cream gown. Sasha told the girls to relax, but Isabel's mind was racing. This wild card was about to flip the script. With a low-key, smug grin, Sasha approached. "So glad you could make it, Your Majesty," she purred. Sasha beamed a friendly smile, but Isabel saw right through the performance. The entire room was icing her out on purpose. But here's the thing about imperial etiquette. If the Empress is seated, nobody, and I mean nobody, is supposed to stand up for anyone else. It's a rule designed to keep the highest-ranking royal from being left in the dust. Yet, every single lady there had blatantly ignored the law just to flex for Sasha. Sasha's innocent act was honestly triggering. Across the silent hall, the tension was thick enough to cut. The consort locked eyes with the Empress, their gazes clashing like the true rivals they were. The sycophants immediately swarmed Sasha, obsessing over how elegant her cream dress looked. Finally, the pieces clicked. Isabel realized why the Duchess had graciously invited her. This was Sasha's play. She had puppet-mastered the Duchess into setting this whole thing up. The goal? Put Isabel in a room where Sasha could shine and make the Empress look like a total outsider. Isabel saw the trap for what it was. The air turned freezing as the 2 powerhouses squared off. Every guest held their breath, waiting for the first strike in this high-stakes social warfare. Our sharp-witted heroine knows it's time to bounce. Isabel wears a smirk of triumph. Then, out of nowhere, she sweeps the entire table setting onto the floor. The guests gasp in sheer terror, especially Sasha, who's seen enough tragedy to last a lifetime. Isabel stands there, hand still outstretched. The Empress radiates pure dominance as she towers over the other ladies. She coolly remarks to the crowd that the natural order in this mansion seems totally trashed. In Isabel's eyes, this tea party's layout needs a serious makeover to match the status quo. Panicked, they scramble to apologize, trying to damage control the chaos. Isabel's gaze snaps to Sasha, calling her out by name. Moments later, she demands to know if the consort has something to say for herself. Shaking like a leaf, Sasha stammers out a plea. The girl begs for Isabel's mercy, playing the new girl in the Empire card. She claims she's just not vibing with the complex etiquette yet, and Pinky promises to do better. Isabel just sighs, bored of hearing the same old tired excuses on repeat. Honestly, schooling her every 5 minutes was becoming a total drag. Our protagonist takes a beat to think. She sees right through Sasha's nervous act. The concubine probably never dreamed she'd be forced to bow to the very Empress she once looked down upon. Isabel declares the tea is already cold and ruined, so it's her cue to exit, and the graceful monarch turns on her heel. But before she's gone, she drops one final, chilling warning. She tells Sasha that from this moment on, she'd better watch her step whenever she's in the Empress's presence. Those words leave the room in a stunned silence. Sasha stays quiet, absolutely humiliated by that public roast. Later that night, in the Emperor's private study, Sasha spills every dramatic detail to Alexander. He hears her out, but his response is cold. She needs to handle her own petty drama. The girl looks totally lost. Alexander, with fake patience, explains that as the ruler of the Empire, he's got way too much on his plate. To babysit some messy tea party spat, he shoots a piercing look at the girl playing the innocent victim. Sasha tries to manipulate him, asking if she's ever been a burden. She claims she's just terrified of letting him down if she can't master the Empire's vibes. She insists she was just venting. He plays along with a charming facade, saying he's not bothered at all. Sasha pouts, saying the Emperor seems too busy to care about her feelings. Alexander's mind is racing. Why is she yapping about this useless story right now? He impatiently drums his fingers on the desk. Finally, the Emperor asks what exactly she wants him to do about it. She pauses, then a slow smile spreads across her face. The consort softly tells him she hopes she's not overstepping by being so concerned, but according to her, after the Fridium tea party, the guests were totally trashing the Empress's reputation. Isabel's stunt had shocked everyone. Alexander asks why he should care. Sasha explains that if she tried to tell the Empress herself, It would just cause more drama. So, the girl makes a move. She suggests he should directly lecture Isabel himself. After all, he is her husband, right? His fingers keep tapping. Sasha is betting that the Empress won't ignore him. Night falls, and moonlight floods the palace halls as Alexander walks. The Emperor is deep in thought about Sasha's request. A dark, wicked grin tugs at his lips. The girl was actually playing the game better than he expected. The truth was out. The consort wasn't the naive angel she pretended to be. She definitely had some bite. It took her a while to get to the point, but her true colors finally leaked out. What Sasha really wanted was for him to put Isabel back in her place. But honestly, there's no room for saints in this toxic world, and she's actually cut from the same cloth as him. Sasha was straight up ruthless, hiding behind a mask of sweetness, a dirty soul obsessed with her own skin, cloaked in a beautiful exterior. He would have been bored to death if she were actually kind. Alexander actually liked having a snake by his side. It's exactly why he kept her as his consort. But depending on the stakes, her little games were starting to get on his nerves. He realized that her recent demands were pushing his buttons. Every little thing felt like a needle prick. He rapped on her door. Guessing his motive, Isabel yanked the door open. Alexander stood tall, waiting. The Empress's face was a map of pure irritation. She questioned if a true emergency had brought him here, so deep into the night. He stayed quiet, a smirk playing on his lips. "May I come in?" he asked smoothly. Isabel stayed mute. Judging the vibe, she let him inside. He nodded a quick thanks. Alexander halted, a thought striking him. It had been an eternity since he last set foot in Isabel's chambers. Over a month must have slipped by since his feet last touched this floor. He heard his wife dryly remark that he'd been ignoring her for 2 whole weeks. What urgent reason could possibly drag him to her room in the dead of night? He flashed a smile. Does a husband really need an excuse to visit his wife? Isabel's annoyance spiked. He was recycling lines from the very start of their story. She demanded a divorce. Was this really the way he chose to treat her now? The Emperor studied her anger. Her face was finally showing a vibrant range of emotions. He remembered the old Isabel, always robotic, jittery, and wearing nothing but a mask of tragic smiles. This Isabel was a complete mystery. At first, he suspected she was just acting out for attention. Yet, the more he observed her, the more he realized that attention wasn't her goal. Something's changed, he mused, his hand twitching with curiosity. Isabel felt like a total stranger. She was indulging in luxury now, and he preferred this new vibe. For a long time, Isabel was Sasha's shadow, even copying her dresses. Rumors claimed the Emperor was cheap. Rumors said he refused to spend on her. Amused, Alexander admitted he had been totally clueless. Her new expression stunned him. 3 years together, and he was still discovering fresh sides of her. "Is that true?" she asked, caught off guard. He just smiled, saying this new personality suited her perfectly. Hearing his praise, the Empress instantly crossed her arms, eyes narrowing with suspicion. She figured she must be wrong. Why else would he visit at midnight if not for something critical? Isabel tried to decode his random flattery. "Well, I happen to love the new me," she replied firmly. Cutting him short, she stated that, if he had no real news, she'd much rather be sleeping. "Go back to your quarters." Alexander shot her a playful, mischievous smirk before she could turn away. "Your new style is a major win," he teased. Sensing a trap, she turned and questioned him. "Don't get it twisted," she warned. "I didn't dress for you." The Emperor let out a long sigh. "I get it. Believe me, you mention divorce daily. I'm just saying your fashion sense is finally fire." Isabel was floored by the genuine praise. Why on earth did her heart just skip a beat? She managed a stiff thank you. Alexander just grinned, leaning in to ask a question. "Why is your face so red?" he teased. Our girl clearly wasn't used to getting real compliments, especially from top-tier visuals. "It's just the lighting," she stammered, trying to hide her red cheeks. Isabel doubled down, insisting it wasn't a blush, just the lamps playing tricks on his eyes. Alexander's grin deepened. He realized this new persona was actually a big deal to her. The Emperor decided this situation was becoming far more captivating than he'd initially guessed. He wasn't even poking fun. Still, her behavior lately had taken a complete and total turn. She used to act like a terrified kitten around him. Alexander remembered that broken version vividly. The old Isabel was basically a lifeless doll, a human puppet just waiting for someone to pull the strings. She used to be so cold. He used to wonder if she'd even feel pain like a normal human. He finally spoke up. "Do you recall the scene you made at the last dinner party?" She hated that question. What was his angle? Alexander confessed he was still struggling to understand her. He asked why she'd acted out, demanding to know if she realized the chaos she'd unleashed. She was stunned to hear such words from the Emperor. Relief washed over him as Wilhelm was hauled off, leaving Isabel completely lost in his wake. Alexander's piercing golden gaze locked onto hers as he finally began to spill the truth. It turned out the Marquis had been sabotaging a rival empire's expansion efforts. While not strictly a crime, the Marquis had uncovered some seriously shady footprints. Specifically, massive tax fraud and stolen military gear. Alexander wasn't about to let this corruption slide. He refused to back down against such a sketchy power play. Then, the real tea dropped. Isabel froze when he admitted to hiring a literal hitman for the job. The goal was to maim Wilhelm, but Isabel's party crash became his ultimate tactical advantage. His cold political maneuvering was calculated, knowing Wilhelm's loyalists would surely riot in protest. They were ready for war, but her sudden interference flipped the entire script upside down. Exactly. Now, every eye in the Empire was glued to the Empress's wild, chaotic moves. Is that why you shielded me at the ceremony? Isabel questioned, her mind racing. That's why the headlines were screaming about a love triangle instead of political scandals. Wilhelm's fall was buried. Alexander noted that since she caused the scene, he had to act. He dispatched royal doctors to the wounded noble, all thanks to the Empress's interference. An 8-week recovery window was all the time Alexander needed to expose every dirty secret. Happy he's gone? He asked. Even the Marquis's own wife seemed relieved to be rid of him. Plenty of palace women shared that hatred. Alexander flashed her a sharp, knowing smirk. He proposed a secret alliance. Publicly, they'd play the part of a couple who couldn't stand each other. Behind closed doors, however, they would be the ultimate power duo working in total sync. The perks were huge, but Isabel fired back that they didn't even have a real bond. She flat-out rejected his deal. Isabel had zero interest in bonding with her soon-to-be ex. Tension crackled between them. If that's how you feel, he countered, then I have no choice. Isabel's guard went up. And what exactly does that mean? She demanded. He teased a new, far more interesting offer, something she might actually find impossible to resist. He was ready to go all out for her. Isabel realized this man was dangerously persistent. Stop talking to me like that, she snapped, her irritation reaching a boiling point. She'd walk through hell for her goals. Alexander crossed his arms, contemplating his next move. We're both incredibly stubborn, he mused. May the best player win this game. Isabel let out a sharp laugh. Got any more bright ideas, Your Majesty? She challenged. She warned him that playing with fire usually ends with everyone getting burned. Careful, she smirked defiantly. I bite. Isabel wasn't about to lose to anyone. Alexander's focus shifted as he reached out, a strange new sensation surging through him. Isabel gasped. An overwhelming urge to touch her took over as he brushed her lips. His face transformed. He couldn't explain it, but the hunger for her was becoming undeniable. More than anything, the Emperor needed to claim Isabel for himself, right now. That night, the room's energy shifted, sparking a sudden, electric tension. Alexander's hand grazed Isabel's cheek, pulling her into his orbit while his heart raced in confusion. His touch lingered, yet the Emperor remained oblivious to the love blooming within him. A single, burning desire consumed him, to kiss her everywhere, from her lips to her brow. He fought his impulses, terrified of how Isabel might push him away. Cupping her face, Alexander leaned in to seal the moment, their breaths finally mingling. But the spell shattered when a feather pillow slammed into his face with lethal force. Dazed, Alexander demanded an explanation, while Isabel doubled down, clutching her weapon tightly. Outraged, the Empress questioned his sanity, shouting if he'd finally lost his damn mind. She rained blows upon him, screaming that seduction wouldn't stop her divorce petition. This trick wouldn't work on her, she hissed, ignoring his pleas for her to relax. Do I look relaxed to you? She snapped before slamming the doors shut in his face. Left in the cold, the Emperor stood there, utterly crushed by his wife's rejection. Isabel threw the pillow aside, fuming over his absolute audacity and nerve. How dare he play games during a divorce? That near kiss was a total jump scare. Shaking it off, she realized dwelling on that moment was a complete waste of energy. A man like him only had eyes for Sasha. True feelings for her were impossible. To her, he was just a fantasy lead. According to the original plot, Isabel was the one chasing him. There was no way he'd suddenly catch feelings now. Kissing without any real emotion, that was just trash behavior and a waste of time. With a face like that and a toxic personality, he must have ruined so many girls. Why did her heart flutter? He tried to kiss her without love. How pathetic. Soon, a new dawn broke over the palace. After a sleepless night of overthinking, Isabel looked like a total wreck the next morning. She cursed him for her exhaustion, glad she'd kicked him out before things got messy. If she'd actually bruised the Emperor's face, the legal fallout would have been a nightmare. She figured if he wanted to retaliate for the pillow attack, he'd have struck by now. His silence meant she was safe, but the uncertainty was eating her alive. Still, Isabel had an empire to run, and the duties of an empress never slept. From overseeing high society to managing delicate diplomacy, her plate was overflowing. These invisible burdens were essential, and they were supposed to be shared responsibilities. Yet, Sasha was still clueless after 6 months, leaving Isabel to drown in paperwork. Gripping her pen, she prayed for a break from this never-ending mountain of royal work. Her maids hovered nervously, noticing her fatigue and begging to lighten her load. Isabel almost declined, until she remembered her role as the story's ultimate villainess. She told them to hold on. Meanwhile, Sasha was busy being pampered by her own staff. Sasha preened, wondering if Alexander was obsessed with her porcelain skin. Suddenly, footsteps approached. The doors flew open with a bang, and Sasha nearly jumped out of her skin at the sight of Isabel. Stuttering, Sasha noted how unexpected the visit was, but the Empress just let out a chilling laugh. Slamming a stack of documents onto the table, Isabel declared she was done carrying the load alone. While Sasha played pretty, Isabel was drowning. Now, the consort was going to pull her weight. Isabel leaned in close, asking why a lazy woman like her was still doing nothing. Later, Isabel finally sat down for tea, relishing a rare moment of absolute silence. She felt a surge of petty joy. Sasha wouldn't have a clue how to handle that workload. Sasha had practically begged for a month, even a week, to learn the ropes. But Isabel didn't give her a second. The deadline was now, and the clock was ticking. This mistress tried ghosting her imperial duties, claiming the emperor granted her a total vacation. But Isabel wasn't moved. Alexander's orders meant nothing. She demanded receipts for Sasha's months of laziness. The palace was literally decaying under her watch. She hired losers and wasted the royal budget. 3 days after Sasha took the wheel, everything broke. Chaos erupted. The staff begged Isabel to return. As things spiraled, our girl finally realized something big. Isabel had carried everyone for years without any thanks. The servants were shaking. Honestly, watching was hard. Isabel felt the pressure, but her villain arc continued. The Empress demanded to know who sent these beggars. Wasn't she supposedly retired? Isabel then turned cold. She asked where Alexander was. Awkward silence followed. They admitted Sasha was a flop, even with help. Isabel knew no amount of backup could help. Sasha's weak mind was simply beyond any saving. But Isabel refused to go back to being used. Enough, she declared, ending the pathetic display. She cleared the room, then an uninvited guest arrived. Alexander appeared, his gaze sharp and demanding. He begged her to return and teach the consort. Offering a lighter schedule just made Isabel more annoyed. He called Sasha noble. He quickly apologized for failing. Alexander admitted his stupidity and made a solemn vow. He promised change. Isabel reminded him of the past. His excuses just made her blood boil. This wasn't an order. It was a desperate plea. He needed a partner. This humility shocked her. She never expected a real apology from him. Regrets didn't matter. Isabel had one final condition. She trapped him with his own empty promises. She demanded a signed contract to ensure his loyalty. He had to educate Sasha and balance the work. He begged for trust and agreed to sign. Isabel added a fail clause, smirking with victory. Her price? Divorce. Alexander stayed silent and fuming. He finally signed, swearing on his royal name. Why take the hard road? Isabel was confused. He kept his word. The emperor actually followed through. Sasha got 5 tutors and 10 hours of hell. Isabel fixed the mess like a true bad girl. She restored order in 15 days. Everyone was floored. The palace echoed with the Empress's legendary name. Everyone was captivated by her elegance. Isabel humbly pleaded for them to stop. Sasha eavesdropped as the maids whispered. Those glowing compliments for the Empress fueled the consort's burning resentment. Word spread that the Empress hired top-tier administrative professionals. The girls gasped, wondering how she conceived such brilliance. One maid theorized about the team. There were 3 specialists, including an official, managing the palace, and another handling charities and the arts. Their results were flawless. A maid began gushing about the Empress's leadership. Within these walls, Isabel was the picture of humility and poise. While they gossiped in the garden, Sasha listened nearby, her skin crawling. Every word of praise was a dagger. Days later, Sasha hosted her own tea party. The guests were stunned by the floral display. One lady remarked, "There must be over 4,000 blossoms here." Sasha offered a flower, seeking validation. She boasted that Alexander gifted them all. Sasha claimed she preferred simplicity, but the emperor insisted on spoiling her. The guests swooned over his supposed devotion. Yet, Count Damien broke the spell. He whispered that nobody truly knew how ruthless the emperor was behind closed doors. He argued that Alexander wouldn't show such favor without genuine affection. Another guest insisted the emperor was a sweetheart. Damien countered that he was only kind to women, because his whims often cost lives. He teased a dark secret before suddenly stopping. Sasha felt a chill from his words. She played the part of a fragile consort, claiming she knew nothing of politics. The arrogant man scoffed, saying women shouldn't worry about such complex matters while the emperor handled the heavy lifting. A girl pointed out Sasha's recent studies. Count Damien went silent. Hearing that Sasha was training to be a better consort, she vowed to work hard to compensate for her past shortcomings. She emphasized the emperor's deep care. Sasha then sighed, mentioning her intense studies were making her head spin. A guest called for help, but Sasha feigned embarrassment at her own weakness. She claimed her only wish was to stop burdening the Empress. She watched them as they debated her workload. Inside, Sasha was smirking with malicious triumph. The consort reassured the crowd. She confessed her desire to be as capable as the Empress, who hired expensive specialists to solve her problems. Sasha played the victim, learning alone, which left the guests utterly shocked. She subtly shaded Isabel's decision-making, questioning the logic behind the hiring. Isabel had squandered nearly 5 million gold coins. Damien revealed he knew of the Empress's lavish spending, even involving Marquis Wilhelm. The crowd gasped. Such extravagance was unheard of in imperial history. Doubts about Isabel's fitness surfaced. The Count reminded Sasha that her father managed the royals' direct affairs. He lectured that men in power must remain purely logical. The ladies looked at him with pure disgust. One guest challenged him to confront the Emperor about the spending personally. A stunned Damien asked why. She replied that since he was so well connected, he was the perfect messenger. Terror gripped him instantly. He stammered about being a newcomer. The ladies mocked his hollow bravado, urging him to show some spine. Suddenly, Sasha called out his name. She tearfully pleaded, saying his intervention with the Emperor would save her. "I'll handle Alexander's temper," the consort promised, leaving Count Damien completely stunned. Finally convinced, he prepared to face the Emperor. Meanwhile, the afternoon tea continued. Sasha smirked. It was all too easy. These noble ladies were totally unreadable. Men were far easier to provoke into a reckless, impulsive frenzy. It took zero effort to make a man surrounded by beauties act on pure instinct. Sasha's plan was working perfectly. Dawn soon broke over the palace walls. Nobles gathered to meet the Emperor, Damien among them, suddenly feeling a surge of doubt. Despite his nerves, he couldn't back down now. Sasha's request haunted him. He was torn but determined to help his friend. As seats were taken, Damien gripped his papers, his mind still racing. He decided this was the perfect agenda item. To Count Damien, the thought of such a reckless woman as Empress was pure insanity. She dared to make Sasha cry. Only Sasha deserved the imperial crown. As a true patriot, the Count refused to let this injustice slide. He had to act before Alexander officially opened the floor. Damien bolted upright, loudly demanding a moment to speak his mind. His uncle hissed a reprimand, furious that Damien hadn't consulted him first. The Count bristled. He wasn't a child to be ordered around anymore. This was his stage to shine. He began his dramatic explanation. He raised concerns regarding the Empress and her two shady assistants. He handed over his investigation. The Marquis jumped up, absolutely livid. "How dare you bring this up without speaking to me?" "It's fine," Alexander said, easing Damien's panic. The Emperor seemed genuinely intrigued. He looked ready to hear every detail. About the public debate regarding the Empress's crimes, Alexander asked if this was truly his own opinion. Damien nodded with a smug grin. "Continue," the Emperor commanded smoothly. Confident he had the Emperor's favor, Damien launched into his rehearsed speech. The elder council members began whispering, their eyes narrowed in judgment. They saw Damien as an arrogant brat, desperate for the spotlight. He believed his brilliance was, finally, being recognized. Even the Emperor was smiling. He was definitely listening. After the presentation, Alexander offered praise. Then came the chilling trap. "Did someone else feed you this nonsense?" Alexander asked pointedly. Damien boasted that 6 friends agreed. Alexander's expression shifted instantly. "So there are only 7 idiots in this room," the Emperor mocked. He'd attacked the Empress's actions against Wilhelm, while his uncle watched in agony. The Marquis watched in horror as the Emperor cornered his nephew. "Did you ever stop to ask why she did it?" Alexander summoned his secretary, who appeared with a mountain of files. "Use your brain for once," Alexander snapped, tossing the documents. He ordered everyone to read the truth, then hurled papers at Damien. With trembling hands, the Count reached for a single sheet. His heart stopped as the reality of the Marquis's nature surfaced. The truth was out. Military smuggling and massive tax embezzlement. Another aristocrat stood frozen, completely losing the ability to speak. The Council of Lords nodded in grim agreement, as the proof was undeniably damning. Alexander dropped a bombshell, exposing Marquis Wilhelm's desperate plan to defect to the Ruthenian kingdom. Once the truth came to light, the Empress staked her very honor to personally settle the score. Count Damien scanned the documents, his face paling at the sheer weight of the charges. Reality hit like a physical blow. The Count's voice cracked, the words dying in his throat. He scrambled to deflect, questioning the Empress's spending on outside experts for palace management of the palace, citing a violation. Alexander's response was a fierce demand, forcing the Count to recite the exact terms Sasha signed upon taking command. Regarding the administration, the Emperor explained that Isabel saw the danger in their current system. Relying on just 2 individuals was a recipe for disaster that could paralyze the entire empire. A single absence would cause total collapse. Once again, Damien found himself trapped in silence. Rising from his throne, Alexander loomed over him, his voice echoing with cold authority. Which mattered more, clinging to outdated traditions or ensuring the security of the imperial court? With that settled, the emperor shifted his icy gaze toward the final remaining issue. 6 brainless fools had dared to slander the empress without knowing the full story. Without another word, he signaled the guards to drag the disgraced Damien down to the dungeons. Elsewhere in the sprawling palace, a serene Isabel sipped her tea in total ignorance. Her mind was miles away, plotting the perfect moment to demand a divorce from Alexander. An unsettling feeling lingered in her chest as the days slowly drifted by. Meanwhile, Sasha slumped in her chambers, a heavy, melancholic sigh escaping her lips. Even with her carefully crafted bait, her grand scheme had crumbled into nothingness. What more could she expect from a man so painfully green and childish? Her dark thoughts were cut short as a maid timidly approached her side. Checking on her mistress, the girl curiously asked what was weighing so heavily on her mind. Sasha brushed it off, but the maid noticed the deep contemplation etched on her face. Finally, Sasha confessed the painful truth. The emperor hadn't visited her in ages. The maid's hearts broke for her, yet they urged her to keep her chin up. They reminded her of his royal duties, though Sasha remembered a time when he prioritized her. Even at his peak workload, he used to come. She just wanted to feel relevant again. Suddenly, a maid suggested Sasha lean into her role as the divine goddess. Her unique ability to bridge different worlds was a power only she possessed. The maid proposed a brilliant idea. Why not introduce a story from her original world? Sasha bolted upright, eyes sparkling. This was the masterstroke she had been looking for. Isabel could never compete with this. Soon, that arrogant empress would finally be humbled. October arrived, painting the palace grounds in vibrant shades of amber and gold. As nature prepared for the chill, a new event was planned to welcome the shifting season. To solidify her divine status, Sasha sent out a formal invitation to Isabel. The letter requested the empress's presence at the goddess's debut. Isabel searched her memories. Nothing in the original plot mentioned this. Something had definitely shifted in the narrative. This was uncharted territory. Isabel knew the consort was desperate to reclaim her spotlight. It was a pathetic attempt to sabotage her. If Sasha wanted love, she should try gifts. Instead of these theatrics, she should focus on quality time. Suddenly, Alexander caught her eye. His gaze was uncharacteristically soft, but Isabel only felt a wave of sheer irritation. Their accidental meetings were becoming too frequent. Why was he being so clingy? Isabel's curiosity finally won out. She stood up, deciding this spectacle was worth seeing. As the palace filled with gossiping nobles, the atmosphere shifted. Suddenly, Sasha appeared in a delicate, pale pink ensemble. Her futuristic, avant-garde style sent shockwaves through the crowd of stunned aristocrats. She hesitated. Was this mini-dress too scandalous for such a conservative realm? Locals rocked floor-length gowns even in sweltering heat, but Sasha shook off the doubt. Reclaiming her palace clout required a power move. This speech had to be legendary. Noble gossip meant nothing to her. Her status alone usually kept the haters at bay. No one dared cross her openly, yet a shadow of sabotage loomed over the gala. She was a threat, a total showstopper capable of snatching everyone's gaze, including Alexander's. No exceptions tonight. Sasha knew Isabel would arrive draped in absolute luxury. Straighter spine, Sasha approached. She remembered when Isabel was just an unremarkable nobody. Biting her lip, she forced a radiant smile, mask on to hide the spiraling anxiety. Tonight, she was the main character. Stepping into the grand hall, the spotlight beckoned. She worked the room, introducing herself as Sasha, the reigning imperial consort. Halfway through her opening, she froze. A traitorous tremor began shaking her fingertips. Stuttering, she mentioned it was her debut hosting, but internal panic started to set in. The crowd's focus shifted. Something flashier stole the vibe. Up on the throne sat Isabel. Isabel's fingers drummed rhythmically. Sasha spiraled. What was so mesmerizing about that rival dress? Impossible. No gown could outshine hers. Suddenly, Isabel's voice cut through the murmurs. Our consort seems lost for words, she purred, commanding the room to face the stage. Don't embarrass the poor girl. With a condescending nod, she gestured for Sasha to resume. Fuming at the sheer audacity, Sasha choked out a forced thank you. The shaking hadn't stopped, but she fought to regain her composure and soldier on. New whispers erupted. Sasha watched, paralyzed, as Alexander draped his royal coat over Isabel. Cover your legs, he insisted. Isabel played it cool, claiming she wasn't cold. He was adamant. Seeing Alexander doting on her rival, Sasha's mind went completely blank. Glaring at Isabel, Sasha gritted her teeth. This was the final straw. No more humiliation. This was her event. She was the hostess, and she wouldn't let anyone ruin her debut. Reclaiming the mic, she pivoted. Let's talk about smartphones, she announced, trying to trend. An absolute necessity, she lied. Isabel smirked, recalling her past life's obsession with tech. To these peasants, it sounded like a divine relic, but a blonde noble wasn't buying it. Impossible, he scoffed. How could an entire library fit in the palm of a hand? Show us now, he challenged. Sasha's heart hammered against her ribs. She was cornered. Panic flared. The crowd pressed her. If she knew so much, could she build one? She sounds like an expert, a duchess whispered. Another noble nodded in agreement. The consort is truly a genius. Sasha felt the walls closing in. Why wasn't storytelling enough? Face burning, she admitted the crushing truth. Creating such a device was impossible. But you're a goddess, the man countered. Sasha scrambled for a believable excuse. I'm merely an apprentice, she stammered. Isabel, now cozy in Alexander's coat, watched the train wreck. She didn't say a word. She just basked in the glorious, messy failure of it all. Imperial universities weren't just schools. They were sacred temples of absolute lifelong devotion. Enrolling meant sacrificing everything to the pursuit of forbidden, ancient knowledge. Most nobles avoided the grind, just like slackers back in her original world. If Sasha was an apprentice, her failure made 0 sense. Isabel scanned the room. Why wasn't Alexander saving his lover from this cringe? Suddenly, a voice called for silence. Sasha locked eyes with Isabel across the hall. Rage and humiliation boiled in her chest. Was Isabel mocking her with fake pity? Sasha's blood ran cold with sheer resentment. She wouldn't go down like this. Turning to her maids, she whispered a desperate command. The staff were hesitant, unsure if the feast was truly ready or needed more time. Sasha demands they serve it immediately, greeting the elite crowd with a forced, elegant smile. She boasts about her diverse menu, inviting everyone to taste her supposedly legendary creations. Isabel watches with suspicion, wondering what's hidden under the lids. The noble ladies lean in. Visually, the meal is a total 10. Guests whisper about the vibrant and beautiful colors. The aroma is enticingly sweet. Sasha officially opens the floor for her grand buffet experience. She's praying for a viral reaction, hoping the high society guests will absolutely love her spread. But as they dig in, the vibe shifts instantly. The crowd starts gagging over the sticky texture. One man's jaw is glued shut, while others can't handle the heat. Sasha is utterly frozen. Guests are desperately gasping for water. Isabel, however, grabs a toothpick to investigate the mess. Surprisingly, our girl thinks it's a bop. It's a weird flex, but the flavors actually hit. The nobles look disgusted. Apparently, honey and rice cakes are way too exotic for this kingdom. Isabel knows the struggle. Even back home, foreigners usually found these traditional flavors quite strange. It's a crime to waste such high-tier food. She can't stand seeing these dishes go ignored. Isabel's gears start turning as Sasha begins to spiral, her hands trembling in pure panic. This was supposed to be Sasha's big main character moment, but it's turning into a disaster. Suddenly, clap! Isabel takes the stage. The Empress commands total silence with just one look. She thanks the guests for coming, while Sasha's soul basically leaves her terrified body. Isabel drops a bombshell, announcing she's prepared a simple, special dish for them. She used the exact same ingredients as the consort. The guests are beyond confused now. Isabel flashes a devious, satisfied smirk. She can practically smell the fear from the nobles. Kimchi usually carries, but that previous combination was a total waste. Time for an upgrade. Forcing people to eat mid-food is a crime. Suddenly, Alexander calls out his wife's name. The emperor wants a plate. She teases him, asking if he's brave enough for a taste. He's skeptical, hoping this round won't be as catastrophic as the first one they just survived. Isabel warns him, her cooking might just be too intense for his precious royal palate. He smirks back, challenging her sudden surge of I'm that girl confidence and fiery energy. Our empress is officially triggered. She looks him dead in the eye and says, bet. She gestures toward her buffet. Alexander laughs, saying this savage version of Isabel is the one he truly recognizes. Isabel's like, excuse me? She's slightly concerned about what the emperor actually means by that. As he serves himself, she explains the struggle of finding legit ingredients in this world. The room goes dead silent. You could hear a pin drop as everyone watches the emperor. His jaw hits the floor. Isabel's low-key panicking, waiting for the emperor's final verdict. It's delicious. The words send shockwaves through the room. Everyone is completely shook. He breaks it down. The spice is perfectly balanced and doesn't overpower the other flavors. The bacon and veggies are a power duo. And the cheese? A total game changer. Isabel's surprised he's such a foodie. Now the guests are finally losing their initial hesitation. Big sigh of relief. The fried kimchi and pancakes are officially a massive, viral success. Our empress is a genius. No soy sauce? She hacked the recipe with salt and rice. The crowd is obsessed, begging for more pancakes. Isabel is officially the MVP of dinner. She figures they're probably just starving after that first disaster, but she'll take the win. The night is saved. Sasha has vanished, so Isabel takes full command of the event. Sasha couldn't handle taking the L in front of Alexander, so she dipped into the shadows. But Isabel's focus shifts. She's curious about Alexander's next move as they finally dine together. He played the role of her food taster, yet his hidden motives remained a mystery. Isabel braced herself, staying sharp. Alexander persisted, determined to sway her into a strategic partnership. Yet, this tea date felt deeper. Was this same calculation why he'd discarded her 3 years ago? Why the sudden support? The Emperor confessed he'd simply underestimated her hidden talents until now. Isabel spun a lie, claiming marriage sparked her culinary passion. Alexander's gaze sharpened. Was she telling the truth? Studying him, she found him dangerously alluring. His striking looks were legendary even in the original novel. Having read his life story, she could predict the twisted logic behind his every move. Back then, her first impression of the novel was simple and chilling. Alexander was a cold-hearted tyrant whose entire universe revolved around Sasha. That was the absolute truth. But as they strolled together, the atmosphere in the Imperial Garden felt strangely different than before. Isabel knew his sharp eyes missed nothing. Usually, he'd never spare a glance for anyone but Sasha. With every step, she reminded herself, soon they'd be nothing more than strangers once again. Secrets still lingered. Suddenly, Alexander gestured toward a patch of delicate blooms, the Isabella flowers. Gorgeous yet lethal, these fragile blooms doubled as both potent medicine and deadly poison. Expecting a tense meeting in his private chambers, she was stunned he'd chosen the open garden instead. Feeling impatient, she snapped that they hadn't come all this way just to admire the scenery. Alexander countered smoothly, claiming there was a unique charm in viewing the blossoms with his empress. The same empress you've ignored for 3 whole years? She challenged, her voice dripping with irony. His eyes flickered. Finally, he admitted she was right. His past treatment had been undeniably cruel. This sudden honesty caught her off guard. Previously, he'd only offered excuses whenever she brought up divorce. Was he actually changing? She tightened her grip, her mind racing with suspicion. His ego was massive. This couldn't be a real apology. Are you actually planning to say sorry? Alexander smirked, offering to fake 1,000 apologies if it meant she'd drop the divorce talk forever. Deception was just another political tool for him. Isabel opened her mouth to retort, but stopped herself. She focused on the petals instead. Stepping closer, Alexander whispered that if things hadn't gone his way, they were even. Then came a shocker. He might actually regret his past actions one day. Stunned into silence, she watched him. Alexander quickly brushed it off as mere nonsense, ending the tension. Recalling the novel, Isabel had labeled him a total sociopath, incapable of feeling any real remorse. Every atrocity he committed was fueled by his obsession with Sasha. Beyond his precious consort, everyone else was just garbage in his eyes. Remembering his true nature, Isabel's guard went back up. I don't follow, she lied. She then questioned if some memories were simply meant to be forgotten. Alexander went quiet. Finally, he noted that she was just trying to ignore his words, and he liked it. Isabel snapped back, making it clear that his presence brought her absolutely no joy at all. Unbothered, he closed the distance. I don't care if you believe me, he declared, his voice low. He insisted that recruiting her as his ally wasn't a trap. It was a genuine invitation. This walk was truly just about the flowers. Extending his hand, he signaled it was time to leave. Isabel recoiled, suspicious of his touch. Was he trying to use his god-tier visuals to manipulate her? She finally took his hand, dead set on not falling for his deadly charms or hidden agenda. For her, no was final. She'd rather rewrite her destiny than lose her heart to Alexander. He admitted he'd enjoyed their time. Isabel dryly suggested he thank Sasha instead for organizing the event. Aren't you going to check on the party Sasha worked so hard on? She prompted. Those piercing golden eyes locked onto hers. Suddenly, he reached out, catching his wife's hand in midair. He bowed, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. Isabel froze, completely baffled by this sudden affection. He flashed a playful, wicked grin. What was that for? She hissed, reminding him of their upcoming divorce. Alexander just chuckled, claiming he was simply treating a lady right. Isabel's face turned bright crimson. Isabel declared that since the goodbyes were over, she was making her exit. Slamming the doors shut, she bid him a cold goodnight before brooding over the chaotic encounter. Isabel realized his loyalty was non-existent. He was just a player chasing whatever girl served his ambition. Behind the heavy door, Alexander stood frozen, questioning his own bizarre and uncharacteristic behavior. He felt intoxicated. Meanwhile, dawn broke over the palace as gossiping nobles began their morning whispers. Rumors flew that the Empress had slapped Marquis Wilhelm just to force a suspension of his duties. While he played dirty, high society ladies elsewhere were starting to rethink their harsh judgment of Isabel. They finally saw the truth behind her dramatic outburst. How noble of the Empress to act so. She traded her own reputation to protect the crown, turning the Golden Hall scandal into a win. What should have been a total disaster was perfectly handled by her quick thinking. She was truly born to rule. Meanwhile, Sasha lurked behind a pillar, eavesdropping on every word. Lost in thought, Sasha kept quiet. Days later, a maid begged the consort to eat her dinner. The girl insisted the meal was packed with all of Sasha's absolute favorites. She tried comforting Sasha, claiming the consort wasn't responsible for the chaos at the gala. Sasha demanded solitude, but the maid stood her ground, visibly shaken by her mistress's state. Her worry was justified. The consort hadn't touched a single bite in 48 hours. Snapping at the persistence, Sasha barked an order for the maid to leave her alone. A heavy silence fell. The maid reeled, stung by such an uncharacteristically rude dismissal. Softening, Sasha blamed her outburst on stress and exhaustion before sending the girl away. Once the room was empty, Sasha gripped her bedsheets, her knuckles turning white. Nothing made sense anymore. How could Isabel possibly know those specific recipes? The emperor had been served kimchi soup and fried rice dishes from another world. Isabel was local-born. The panicked consort spiraled, wondering how this could be possible. What were the odds of the empress replicating a dish that didn't even exist in this reality? If Isabel actually understood Korean culture, how on earth did she cross over? It was impossible. Dimension hopping was a power reserved strictly for the holy oracles. Mortals usually lost their minds or memories crossing worlds. Maybe Isabel was just a fast learner. Perhaps she'd eavesdropped on secrets, or stumbled upon some forbidden, ancient text. Still, Sasha couldn't wrap her head around it. The goddess was the only true bridge. Usually, outworlders brought their own heritage to enrich and assist this empire. Those foreign traditions were meant to be documented in books and spread widely. Isabel shouldn't possess exclusive knowledge. Shaking, Sasha slumped onto her mattress. She stared at her trembling hands, paralyzed by a fear that was slowly consuming her. The pressure was becoming unbearable. Sasha felt her entire world beginning to crumble. Her bond with Alexander and her social standing were both slipping through her fingers. Even her pawns were betraying her. She desperately needed to uncover Isabel's secret. She had to find the source of Isabel's intel before the Empress became a lethal threat. A commoner whispered to a laborer, curious about the mysterious noblewoman who just arrived. Surrounded by elite guards, the Empress's sudden presence sent shockwaves through the crowd. Navigating the masses, Isabel smirked, satisfied with the massive stir she was causing. Citizens flocked to catch a glimpse of royalty as she walked down De La Mancha Street. This was the notorious black market, a lawless den where anything could be bought for a price. It was the ultimate spot for anyone hunting for something suspicious. Isabel knew this grimy underworld was no place for a refined lady. Ignoring the danger, she pressed forward, determined to find what she sought. Palace maids whispered in fear for her. Even the trembling guards earned her secret sympathy. Alexander's erratic behavior left her cornered. The Empress had to orchestrate a major scandal. Only a massive catastrophe would grant her the divorce she craved. Squandering a fortune here would surely stain the royal family's reputation forever. Trailed by guards, Isabel stormed a shop, determined to drain every cent. Despite her shopping spree, sunset found a weary Isabel slumped on a bench. Face buried in her palms, the Empress felt utterly defeated. It was a disaster. She aimed to blow her cash on cursed artifacts, but the final shop shocked her. "I'll buy everything," she declared. The merchant gaped, questioning if she meant the entire stock. To her horror, the man boasted only of top-tier gifts the emperor would adore. She yearned to escape this world, yet people mistook her spree for pure devotion. There had to be another way. She paused, her mind racing for a solution. A sudden uproar pulled a crowd toward the plaza, piquing Isabel's intense curiosity. "What's the chaos?" she asked. A guard replied that a massive auction was underway. This was it, the perfect opportunity. Why hadn't she considered an auction sooner? Priceless treasures awaited. Isabel rose instantly, commanding her guards to follow her lead. Perhaps a scandalous purchase here would trigger an immediate divorce. The auctioneer welcomed the noble crowd, boasting about his unrivaled high-end merchandise. But this merchandise was horrifying. They were actually war prisoners from across the border. Bound by imperial law, these humans were being sold. Isabel was sickened by the sight. It wasn't illegal, but cruel loopholes clearly allowed this dark trade to flourish. Most nobles hesitated to bid, despising the idea of bringing foreigners into their homes. One young girl stood there, shaking violently as tears streamed down her pale face. This was a human rights nightmare, yet Isabel had to maintain her royal composure. A familiar backstory flashed in her mind. Then, the auctioneer announced the first lot. A stunning 18-year-old girl with master sewing skills was put on display. As the girl wept, Isabel's heart shattered. This barbaric auction made her blood boil. The prices soared. Greedy nobles kept outbidding each other with staggering amounts. "Any more bids?" The auctioneer smirked, until Isabel's voice cut through the air. Rising with a piercing gaze, she invoked her authority. "By order of the Empress." Shock rippled through the crowd. The auctioneer froze, while the captive girl watched in awe. Trembling, the girl watched Isabel's elegant stride. "I, Isabel of Castile, hereby decree it." She officially terminated the auction, commanding every soul to clear the room immediately. The merchant protested, whining about the massive financial disaster this would cause him. He feared losing his client's trust, but Isabel silenced him with a deadly glare. Paralyzed by her royal aura, the man watched as she handed him a blank check. She made it clear, once she signed, every single captive belonged to her. The greedy man bowed in gratitude. Isabel realized money was his only god. As the room emptied, she approached the captive girl, evaluating her next move. These poor souls couldn't speak the tongue and were helpless in this strange land. Starvation or being recaptured by thugs, that would be their fate if she left them. Isabel felt the crushing weight of the lives now under her protection. She would provide them safety and the human dignity they were so cruelly denied. The mob vanished, leaving only guards and trembling prisoners under the Empress's wing. Without her help, they'd face hunger or fall back into the hands of monsters. Isabel weighed her options. How could she fix this mess? After a tense silence, she declared their lives were now hers to protect. "Trust me," she commanded, adding that they'd serve at her side in the palace. Meanwhile, deep within the imperial walls, the secretary informed Alexander of Isabel's trip to Delamain Street. He tapped the tub impatiently. His aide instantly recognized that nervous habit, signaling the emperor's rising fury. The man warned that the empress roaming such slums could tarnish the royal family's prestige. But Alexander snapped back. Reputation wasn't the issue. "Do you realize how deadly that place is?" The secretary watched him finish bathing. Alexander decided he'd have to go drag her back himself. Back at the auction, a guard pulled her aside. He whispered that commoners didn't belong in the imperial palace, begging her to rethink this radical employment plan. Isabel scanned the guards, who were desperately trying to block her from saving these people. "Shut it," she snapped. From this second on, their fate rested solely on her shoulders. The crowd stood frozen. She ordered they be educated in language and law for 3 hours daily. Overwhelmed, a young girl burst into tears of gratitude. This was her second chance. She collapsed before Isabel, sobbing uncontrollably while thanking the Empress for showing such mercy. Our MC stayed quiet, realizing just how traumatized and terrified these people actually were. These poor souls never knew if tomorrow meant death or something even worse. Isabel commanded the chains be shattered. "Take everyone to the palace immediately," she barked. She planned to fund their studies for a year before granting them a massive donation. Soon, they'd be free. Suddenly, a violent shouting match erupted nearby, breaking the moment. A total scumbag was berating a small boy, screaming at him to move his useless body. The child's hands shook violently. The man spat that all trash like him were identical. Pure rage surged through Isabel. How could anyone lay a finger on someone so fragile? "Drop it!" she roared, demanding to know if the boy was also a prisoner. She had bought everyone's freedom. How was one left behind? Her blood began to boil. The filthy merchant shrugged, claiming the boy was broken because of his mangled, limping leg. "He's coming with me," Isabel hissed. Then, she demanded he hand over his whip. The boy lay paralyzed on the dirt, unable to process the chaos unfolding above him. Stepping forward, the Empress snatched the whip. "You clearly don't understand the danger you're in." "Crack!" she lashed out, catching him right across the face. Isabel felt a cold satisfaction. "You have no right to touch a child," she growled, her grip tightening on the leather. She warned that if he didn't vanish, he'd taste real pain. The man's face went pale. Terrified of her aura, the coward turned tail and sprinted away into the shadows. Her guard stood there, speechless. Isabel realized that one single strike had drained her. Her arm throbbed. The guard noted it was likely because she'd never fought before. Obviously, an empress's life rarely involved such raw physical violence or manual labor. Still, she figured this scandal would finally force the emperor to grant her that divorce. Visiting a black market, freeing slaves, and assault, she was basically begging to be exiled. Her guard looked exhausted. Isabel, however, could practically taste her upcoming freedom. The boy spoke up, his voice trembling as he thanked her for her divine kindness. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently, already planning to summon the best doctors. But then, the plot thickened. The boy looked up, his eyes burning with intense devotion. He vowed to dedicate his entire existence to repaying the debt he owed her. Isabel paused. Who was this stunningly handsome boy with those mesmerizing light eyes? "What's your name?" she asked. The mysterious boy began his formal introduction. Caleb. That name echoed in Isabel's mind like a distant bell. It hit her this boy was a major male lead. In the original novel, Caleb enters mid-story. But don't let that angelic face fool you. Appearances are deceiving. Behind those eyes lurks a chilling darkness. Born to prisoners of war, he's been shackled in slavery since childhood. Yet, this prodigy mastered the mystic arts alone, clawing his way up to the 7th circle as a legendary archmage. With such raw talent and power, he shattered his own chains and established the most formidable information guild in the land. He was hopelessly devoted to Sasha. Using his magic and vast intel network, he protected her. But was this fragile boy truly that Caleb? The same one from the auction? Isabel cupped his face, searching for any resemblance to the future hero. The wavy chestnut locks, those sweeping eyelashes, and that hauntingly sweet face. It was a perfect match. He should be 16 by now, yet he looked painfully small, as if time had frozen for him. Her heart ached. Years of brutal enslavement had clearly left him starved and fragile. He was far more skittish than the novel described. Perhaps the trauma of youth had suppressed his fire. Caleb's lips trembled, trying to speak. Realizing she was hovering too close, Isabel pulled back and apologized. She promised to set him free. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them. Speak of the devil, Alexander had actually made it in time. Stunned, Isabel froze. The Emperor's voice cut through the air, demanding to know why she was there. Neither dared to speak. Alexander loomed closer, his presence suffocating as he repeated the icy question. Why was she here? Deflecting the pressure, Isabel boldly flipped the script, asking the same of him. It was a bluff, of course. She knew exactly why he'd come. He was likely seething with pure rage, tracking her all the way to this slum. Flashing a playful grin, she asked if he was here for a lecture. If so, why not just kick me out of the palace? She teased. He met her with stony silence. The tension was insane. Alexander ignored her jab, eyes narrowing at the ragged boy beside her. She explained she'd liberated him. Then, Alexander dropped a bombshell. Why were you trying to kiss him? Isabel nearly choked. That was a total misunderstanding. Bristling with indignation, she demanded an explanation. I was checking his wounds, she snapped. Did he really think she was that much of a predator? Alexander's gaze shifted to the bruises. Suddenly, the icy atmosphere around him began to thaw. The rage vanished, replaced by a sigh of pure relief. He admitted. He was just glad it wasn't what it looked like. Otherwise, the scandalous rumors would have stained the crown. Isabel told him to chill out. Tucking her hands away, she asked if he'd hunted her down for trespassing on forbidden ground. Alexander smirked. Not at all, he replied. Why would something so trivial upset me? Isabel was baffled. The Emperor just watched her. Then, moving fast, he leaned in close to whisper a shocking secret. He actually owned this entire district. Right after his coronation, he'd made a secret power move. Using shadow funds, he purchased every business here for total leverage. It was his personal hub for monitoring every underground activity in the capital. He chuckled, his hands firm on her shoulders. This is a strictly classified secret, he murmured. Even my secretary is in the dark, but you're my empress. His smile widened, dripping with hidden meaning. Isabel stood there, her mind reeling from the revelation. She processed the weight of his words. No man would be stupid enough to hand over such dangerous leverage to a woman he planned to leave. This secret was a chain, a declaration that divorce was off the table, permanently. It was a flex of absolute confidence. By sharing this, he'd effectively trapped her by his side. Fate tangled her with him once more, Isabel fumed, feeling like a pawn in a rigged game. The bitterness stung. Some stories were simply too exhausting to ever relive. She locked eyes with Caleb, testing his resolve. Is your mind truly set on this? His knuckles turned white as he gripped his hands. Finally, he looked up with a burning gaze. Caleb chose her side, swearing to be her shadow. Isabel nodded, sensing his raw potential. Refine your mana, she suggested. He paused, wondering if he'd be alone at the academy. Isabel promised him friends his own age, but tears blurred his vision as he began to plead. Please don't send me away, he confessed the dark history of the bullies who broke him. The trauma of his past made him tremble. Isabel felt a sharp pang of sympathy for him. To suffer such cruelty so young was tragic. Had he sought revenge, or was he still lost? A fragile soul, or a sleeping lion? Caleb swore to grow into a man she'd admire. Isabel wavered, then saw the desperate honesty in his eyes. She finally understood his fear. With a heavy sigh, she relented. The palace gates would remain open for him. He'd stay for a year. Caleb beamed, a ray of pure joy radiating from his face. You won't abandon me? He whispered. The boy was drowning in pure, unadulterated happiness. Her personal night. His empty existence finally had a spark of legendary purpose. Never call your life meaningless, she commanded. Every soul in this world has divine value. Every life holds a hidden treasure. Caleb watched her, his deep gaze filled with newfound devotion. He bowed, promising to watch his words. She turned, sensing the heavy atmosphere shifting. Is there anything else? She asked. A lingering shadow still haunted the boy's expression. He swore a blood oath. His life, his soul, everything he owned now belonged to her. Dropping to his knees, Caleb kissed her foot. Isabel flinched in pure, startled shock. With puppy eyes, he claimed he lived only to please her. She urged him to rise. Don't ruin your new silks, she teased. Meanwhile, in the Emperor's silent, cold office, Alexander's pen scratched aggressively against the parchment. Fury simmered beneath his icy exterior. That brat Caleb was a total eyesore. Why did he have to cling to Isabel? A useless knight. Alexander's temper flared, but he forced himself to take a breath. Isabel had her reasons. He couldn't risk their fragile bond over a mere servant boy. Their relationship was priority number one. He wouldn't let jealousy cloud his imperial judgment. He was an emperor, above petty drama. Yet, the Rue de la Mont's rumors were spreading. Those scandalous purchases bothered him far more than any annoying servant brat ever could. That forbidden street was a red flag. The public was starting to whisper in judgment. The nobles demanded answers. Silencing the gossip would be a logistical nightmare even for him. Erasing every witness's memory was impossible, but compared to her secrets, this was nothing. What did she buy that was so inappropriate? Isabel was hiding her haul away. Locked in her private chambers, the items remained a mystery. Compromising secrets kept under lock. She was a master strategist. Was she planning a night of passion with a stranger? With anyone else, maybe. But Isabel? She only ever spoke of a cold divorce. She shunned his very presence. Alexander leaned back, his mind racing with dark possibilities. No more guessing games. He decided to confront the mystery head-on and find the truth. He stalked through the corridors, Isabel's defiant face haunting every step he took. If she truly desired him, why was she always so icy and impatient in his company? A heavy sigh escaped him. He had to bridge the growing chasm between them tonight. He marched toward her room, determined. The silence of the palace felt like a ticking bomb. Was there hope for a night together, or just another round of her cold rejection? Alexander replayed that night in his mind, the failed kiss and her explosive fury. The whole situation felt bizarre. Unforeseen events were clicking together like clockwork. Logically, this should have annoyed him. Yet, he felt no irritation at all. A faint smile touched his lips. He knocked on her door with newfound caution. But hushed voices drifted from the Empress's suite. It was Caleb, sounding incredibly suspicious. The youth was pledging his eternal gratitude and devotion to her. He even tried to decline the expensive gifts she was pressing on him. Isabel insisted, questioning his refusal. She had handpicked those luxuries just for him. No one else was allowed to wear them. Alexander's blood boiled. At this hour? Why were they whispering like lovers in her private chambers so late? It was insulting. Isabel rejected his offerings but showered Caleb with fine silks. He threw the doors open. Isabel demanded to know his business at such an hour. The Emperor gripped the doorframe tightly. He offered a cold apology for the intrusion, but his jealousy spiked. What kind of night lingers in an empress's bedroom? A tense silence fell over the three of them. Isabel questioned his cryptic tone. He was the one trespassing here. Caleb instantly dropped to his knees, begging mercy. He swore the Empress was blameless. He'd only come because she summoned him. Isabel raised a hand, silencing the boy right in front of the Emperor. She ordered the boy up. Alexander's rage peaked, seeing her defend the knight's honor. His fists clenched. Isabel challenged him. Could she not reward her own loyal subordinate? Did he truly suspect her of cheating? They had already settled this messy topic. She'd been crystal clear back then. Alexander claimed he didn't doubt her loyalty, but he doubted the boy's boundaries. Isabel then dropped a truth bomb. She was the one who called for Caleb. They locked eyes in a heavy silence. Alexander questioned his own recklessness. Baseless accusations would only poison their fragile bond. This would ruin his standing with Isabel. He tapped his fingers in restless frustration. Isabel watched, waiting for his move. He seemed lost in a dark trance. Why did he lose his cool around her? Turning, he addressed the knight. He ordered Caleb to leave immediately. Once the boy vanished, they were alone. The night deepened. Outside, Caleb waited in silence, swinging his feet with anxiety. He glanced back at her door. Inside, the royal couple stared each other down. Without saying a word, Alexander's piercing golden gaze locked onto hers. Isabel told him to quit staring if he expected her to be in a good mood. He played dumb. She snapped that he surely arrived with a hidden agenda. She accused him of overanalyzing her every word to plan his next move. Alexander's mask crumbled. He confessed that her growing brilliance only fueled his obsession. Isabel countered, advising him to watch more closely. She offered a stern warning. He should stop doing things that provoke others' resentment. Alexander was genuinely stunned. He laughed and asked whether an emperor should care about others' opinions. How could he possibly make someone else happy? He stalked toward her. He was dying to know. Isabel waved him off, telling him to forget the divorce. The dream of a clean break was dead. He called it a tragic shame. Seizing her hand, he kissed it with a dark intensity. He wouldn't let go. He admitted he'd rather she beg him to crawl at her feet, because that was more likely than them ever living apart. Isabel stood frozen. Her face flushed a deep crimson as she snapped that his joke was totally unfunny. Our lead honestly hadn't intended that, yet Isabel labeled him as completely arrogant. She claimed he was heartless toward her, but Alexander simply bridged the gap between them. The Emperor questioned her true feelings before suddenly reaching out his hand. Confused by his movements, Isabel gasped as Alexander seized her waist and yanked her close. Pinning her to the mattress, he whispered that she had no idea what he was capable of. To keep her by his side, she stared in shock, while Alexander gazed back with pure devotion. The Emperor loomed over her, both lost in a daze, as they locked eyes. Admitting she fascinated him, Alexander brushed a strand of her hair aside to finally prove his sincerity. He pressed a tender kiss to her locks, leaving Isabel spiraling. Was he insane, or just moving way too fast? With a smirk, Alexander cupped her face while she breathlessly called out his name. Their lips finally collided in a passionate moment. Talk about a major cliffhanger! He surrendered to the sensation, but Isabel was definitely not feeling the vibe. Desperate, she grabbed a nearby pillow, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. The Emperor's face burned red as Isabel pulled back, her eyes blazing with fury. She demanded he leave her chambers, repeating the order until he finally got the hint. Our heroine looked utterly shaken after that kiss, clutching her pillow with trembling hands. Alexander offered a quick apology before retreating, cursed by his own reckless impulses. Recalling his outburst and her terrified expression, regret started to sink in deep. Pacing the moonlit courtyard, the Emperor couldn't fathom why he'd lost control like that. Determined to fix things, he struggled with the truth of his own desires. Terrified of his own heart, the Emperor wondered if he was losing his mind. How could he still crave her lips? That kiss had left him completely reeling. Questioning if he'd crossed a line, he tried to justify his sudden spark of pleasure. Was this normal? It seemed only Isabel could trigger this intense reaction in him. His jealousy over her talking to another guy was getting weirder by the second. It was late, and they were alone. Given their status, things were bound to get messy. In this empire, royal marriages often involved complex arrangements and secret lovers. Technically, their contract meant she could see other men, but the thought of Caleb made his blood boil. He shouldn't care, yet he was absolutely livid. What was actually happening to him? What was haunting the Emperor? Did he crave something more meaningful with Isabel? He wanted more than a political alliance. He hungered for a real, intimate connection. A bond transcending mere duty. He tried to settle his racing thoughts with that idea. Alexander wanted Isabel fiercely. She was the only one he wished to stand beside. He longed to protect her beyond his imperial role, pacing the courtyard to clear his head. He had to stop obsessing over that kiss. Dwelling on it was a total dead end. His head was spinning. Suddenly, a pillow went flying across the bedroom. Pillows were launched into the air, until one smacked Isabel right in the face. She stood paralyzed with the pillow pressed against her, gripping it like a lifeline. Shaking with rage, she let out a muffled scream and started kicking the air. Springing up, she felt insane. Why on earth did she let him kiss her? Sure, he initiated it, but she had actually enjoyed it and kissed him right back. Her pride was in shambles. Isabel desperately wished her husband wasn't such a god-tier kisser. Collapsing onto the bed, she tried to forget the chaotic events of the previous night. Too drained to even think about shopping, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching from outside. Intrigued by the commotion, Isabel rose as a panicked maid burst into the chamber, calling for Her Majesty. Annoyed, Isabel demanded to know the source of the chaos, insisting she wanted a quiet day alone and dismissing the girl. Bowing in apology, the maid dropped a bombshell. The Emperor himself was demanding an audience with his Empress immediately. Isabel was stunned. Had Alexander lost his mind? How dare he summon her after the drama of last night? Fuming over his recent behavior, she told the maid to report back that the Empress was too ill to attend. But the girl persisted, claiming it was urgent. Alexander's relentless audacity was truly testing Isabel's patience. She desperately wanted to ignore him, but she couldn't let the innocent maid take the fall for her defiance. Plus, curiosity won out. Isabel needed to see his game. She agreed to meet him in 30 minutes. When she arrived, Alexander smirked, noting she'd made it to his office much faster than he'd expected. In a total power move, Isabel appeared in her messy nightgown, hair disheveled, making it clear she didn't care. What game is the Emperor playing now? And that wraps up today's wild journey, everyone. Hope you're loving the drama. Do you think Alexander will finally wake up and realize he's falling for her? Their chemistry is honestly top tier, but who's lurking in the shadows, waiting to sabotage them? Can Isabel actually secure that divorce? Or will fate pull them closer? Drop your theories below. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more spicy manhwa recaps. Keep up with the chaos in divorcing my tyrant husband. I'll see you in the next one. That was everything through chapter 30. Stay legendary. See ya.